The morning. Evelyn Carter burned every dress her mother had sewn for her. Nobody came to stop her. She stood behind the barn, feeding silk and cotton into the fire. One piece at a time, dresses made for a woman the town wanted her to be. Smaller, quieter, invisible. If you've ever been told you were too much for a world that wasn't big enough to hold you, this story is for you. Subscribe to this channel, follow this story to the very end, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The summer of 1887 arrived in Harding County, Texas, the way it always did, without mercy and without apology. The dust came first, rolling down off the ridge in great red-brown curtains that settled over the fields and the fence posts and the faces of the people who worked beneath them. Then came the heat pressing down on everything like a hand that would not lift. Evelyn Carter had been awake since before the sun. She didn't sleep well in summer. The small room she shared with nothing but a cracked mirror and a nightstand her father had built when she was 7 years old held heat like a clay oven, and by 3 in the morning she was usually sitting up listening to the silence of the house, waiting for the sky outside her window to shift from black to gray. By the time the first rooster crowed across the field, she was already dressed and moving. She pulled on her work boots, wide, broken, impractical, laced them with the quick efficiency of a woman who had done the same thing 10,000 times. She braided her dark hair back from her face, catching the loose pieces that always fell across her forehead, no matter what she did with them. She splashed water from the basin on her neck and cheeks, not bothering with the mirror. She had stopped looking in the mirror for anything other than necessity a long time ago. Not because she was ashamed, or rather, not only because of that, but because the mirror had started to feel like the town did, like it was showing her something she wasn't supposed to argue with, like it was telling her to be quiet about what she wanted and grateful for what she had. She was grateful. She told herself that every morning. She went out to feed the horses. The Carter Ranch wasn't large by Texas standards, but it was hers in the way that a place becomes yours when you are the one who maintains it. Her father, George Carter, had built it 30 years ago on land that had cost him more than money. He had poured his youth into it, his back, his first good horse. 2 of his fingers lost to a fence-cutting accident in the winter of 1861 that he never talked about, but that Evelyn had heard described in pieces late at night when the old men of the county gathered on porches. George Carter was a fair man, a tired man, a man who had once been capable of great tenderness, and who had, over the years of drought and debt and disappointment, retreated into a quieter version of himself that Evelyn sometimes struggled to recognize. He loved her, she knew that. He just didn't always know what to do with her. She was not what he had expected. None of the Carter women had been built the way Evelyn was, broad and solid, with a heaviness that she had carried since childhood, that had grown with her as she grew, that no amount of hard work had ever reduced, because the work had only made her stronger, more capable, more present in her body, in a way that the town found inconvenient, and her own family found difficult to discuss. Her mother had tried when she was alive. Stand straight, Evelyn. Pull in. Smile smaller. Don't eat so fast at the table, people are watching. Her mother had not been a cruel woman. She had been a frightened one. Frightened of what the world would say about a daughter who didn't fit its picture of what a woman should look like. Frightened of what it would cost Evelyn out there in a world that was not kind to women who couldn't make themselves small enough. She had died 4 years ago in the spring from a fever that moved fast. Evelyn still thought about her every morning in the hour before the rest of the house woke up. Not with bitterness. With something more complicated than that. With the grief of loving someone who hurt you without meaning to, who was trying to protect you in the only language they had learned. She poured feed into the trough and listened to the horses move toward her in the half-dark. "Morning, Jack," she said to the big roan who always came first, who pressed his nose against her shoulder when she stood still long enough. "Morning, Bess." The horses didn't care what she weighed. She appreciated that about them more than she could ever say out loud. The trouble began, as it often did, on a Sunday. Sundays in Harding County meant church, and church meant the Whitmore family's gathering on the lawn afterward. And the Whitmore gathering meant that every unmarried woman in the county, between the ages of 16 and 35, was expected to appear presentable and available and grateful for the opportunity to be evaluated. Evelyn went because her father asked her to. Because Clara asked her to. Clara Carter was 22 years old and beautiful in the way that made people stop mid-sentence when she walked into a room. Dark gold hair that she wore in careful curls. A narrow waist that she laced into a dress every Sunday morning, with the dedication of a woman who understood that appearance was a kind of currency and intended to spend it wisely. Blue eyes that had a way of widening at exactly the right moment, so that the man she was speaking to felt like the most interesting person she had ever encountered. She was also Evelyn's cousin. They had grown up in the same house after Clara's mother, George Carter's sister, had passed when Clara was 11. George had taken her in without discussion, because that was what you did. And Evelyn had shared her room, her clothes, when Clara needed them, her portion of the biscuits on tight mornings when there wasn't quite enough. She did not hate Clara. She had tried very hard over the years not to hate Clara. It was difficult on Sundays. "You're going to wear that," Clara said that morning, standing in the doorway of the kitchen, looking at Evelyn's clean but unadorned dress. Dark blue cotton fitted to her body, practical and decent, and entirely uninterested in making a statement. "I'm wearing it," Evelyn said. She was wrapping the cornbread she had been up since 4 o'clock baking 3 loaves for the Whitmore table, because Mrs. Whitmore had asked if anyone could contribute, and Evelyn had said yes before thinking about it. "You could at least put on the green one. The one the one Aunt Ruth made." "That dress doesn't fit me the way she made it anymore." "Well, if you would just—" "Clara." Evelyn said it quiet, not angry, just final. Clara stopped. She had learned over the years to recognize that particular tone, the one that said Evelyn was done with a subject and would not be revisited. "I'm only trying to help," Clara said softer now. "I know." Evelyn picked up the basket with the cornbread. "I'm ready when you are." The Whitmore lawn was already crowded by the time they arrived. Long tables had been set up under the oak trees, spread with white cloth, and covered in dishes that women had been cooking since the night before. There was pie and roasted chicken and potato salad and biscuits and preserves in glass jars that caught the light. Children ran between the legs of the adults. Old men sat in chairs near the fence talking about water rights and cattle prices. Young women clustered in small groups watching the cluster of young men on the other side of the yard, with the careful attention of people playing a game they hadn't written the rules to. Evelyn set her cornbread on the table. "Oh, Evelyn made cornbread," said Martha Hobbs, who was standing nearby, and who said it in the way that people say something when they intend the observation to be noticed. "That's sweet." Evelyn smiled, the kind of smile she had developed over many years, present, polite, and entirely impenetrable. "Thank you, Martha." She moved away before Martha could say anything else. She had learned the geography of the Whitmore lawn over years of these gatherings, which clusters were safe to be near, which conversations she could enter without becoming the subject of them, where she could stand that was close enough to seem sociable and far enough away to be left alone. She had found a spot near the lemonade table when she heard it. It started as a shift in the crowd, a change in the quality of the noise, conversations, pausing heads turning, the particular ripple of attention that moves through a group when something worth looking at has arrived. She turned. 3 men had come through the gate at the edge of the yard. 2 of them she knew, Bill Massey and his nephew, who worked land south of town. The 3rd man she had never seen before. He was tall. Taller than most men she had encountered, and she'd grown up around cowboys who ran to lean and capable. But this man had a different quality to his size, not just height, but a kind of settled weight to him, the bearing of someone who had been tested enough times that he no longer felt the need to prove anything. He wore a dark hat that he didn't take off until he had crossed the yard and greeted old Silas Whitmore, at which point he removed it with the kind of unhurried courtesy that looked like it had been practiced until it became instinct. Dark hair gray at the temples. A face that was weathered without being worn, the face of a man who had lived outdoors for most of his life and had made a kind of peace with what that had cost him. A jaw that looked like it had an opinion about most things and kept it to itself. He was, Evelyn thought objectively, the kind of man that women in Harding County would talk about for 3 weeks. Clara had already noticed. Evelyn could tell, because Clara had drifted seemingly without effort, as if drawn by some natural gravity from the group of women she'd been standing with toward the path that the new man and the Massey brothers were taking toward the food tables. And because Clara had turned just slightly and given Evelyn a look. Quick and assessing. The kind of look that asked without words, "Do you see him?" And then, "Don't bother." Evelyn looked away. She poured herself a glass of lemonade. Tapeg. His name was Cole Harrison. She learned this from overhearing Mrs. Whitmore introduce him to a group of people near the pie table, because Mrs. Whitmore introduced everyone within hearing distance when she thought it served her social interests, and Cole Harrison clearly served them considerably. "He owns the Ridgeback Ranch up in Montana," Mrs. Whitmore was saying in the particular tone she reserved for information she considered important. "Moved to Texas to run cattle on land he purchased last spring. The Devereaux property out past Miller Creek. 1,200 acres, I'm told." "My goodness," said the woman beside her. "A widower," Mrs. Whitmore added with the gravity of someone delivering significant intelligence. "Lost his wife some years ago. Tragic, I understand. But he seems to have found his footing." Evelyn stopped listening, or tried to. She was good at not listening when she wanted to be. She picked up a plate and served herself some of the potato salad and a piece of chicken because she was hungry, and because she had been awake since before 4 and had done 2 hours of work before putting on her church dress, and she was not going to stand at the edge of the Whitmore lawn pretending she wasn't hungry because the town would rather see her eat less. She ate. She watched the rooster chasing one of the Whitmore children across the yard. She thought about the fence on the north side of the pasture that needed repair and whether she could get to it before the end of the week. She was thinking about the fence when the shadow fell over her. "Beg your pardon, miss." The voice was low, not loud. The kind of voice that didn't need to be loud because it had learned that speaking quietly made people lean in to hear you, which gave you a different kind of authority than raising your volume. She looked up. Cole Harrison was standing 2 feet away from her, hat in hand, looking at her with the direct, unhurried attention of a man who was actually looking. Not glancing, not assessing and moving on. Looking. "Is that the cornbread from the end table?" he asked. She blinked. Of all the things she had expected him to say, which was nothing, because she hadn't expected him to speak to her at all, it was not that. "Yes," she said. "Did you make it?" "I did." He nodded slowly, as if she had confirmed something he had suspected. "It's exceptional. I haven't had cornbread like that since my mother used to make it, and she was from Georgia and took her recipe with her when she passed." Evelyn looked at him for a moment. He was not joking. He was not making conversation in the way people made conversation at the Whitmore gathering, performing interest without having any. "It's a simple recipe," she said. "Cast iron, not a pan. And buttermilk, not regular milk. That's most of it." "I'd have said it was something more than technique," he said. "But I'm no baker." "Most people aren't particular about cornbread. Most people," he said, "eat too fast to taste what they're eating." He looked at her, not at her body, not at her dress, not at the parts of her that the town spent so much time assessing, at her face, specifically at her eyes. "I'm Cole Harrison. I've just come into the county." "I know," she said. "Mrs. Whitmore introduced you to most of the yard." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but the thing that lives in a face just before a smile decides whether to happen. "I noticed that. She's very thorough." "She is." "And you're gay, Evelyn Carter. My family has the ranch about 4 miles east toward the ridge." "Carter," he repeated. "George Carter's family. His daughter." He nodded. "I rode past that land on the way in from the south. Good pasture. The north fence needs attention, but the soil looks sound." Evelyn stared at him. "You noticed the north fence," she said. "Hard to miss if you know what to look for. I have it scheduled for repair by Thursday." "That's soon." He said it without condescension, like a man who meant it as a straightforward observation about the difficulty of the task, not a comment on her ability to manage it. "It is," she agreed. "But it needs to be done before the Hendersons move their cattle through the lower field, or I'll have strays in with our horses." How was quiet for a moment. Behind him, she could see Clara drifting closer, not approaching, not yet, but positioning. The way Clara positioned when she had identified a target and was determining her angle. "You manage the ranch?" Cole asked. "Someone has to." "Your father." "My father manages the finances and the relationships with the other ranchers. I manage the land and the animals." She said it matter-of-factly without apology. It was the truth. It had been the truth for 4 years since her mother died, and her father had retreated into himself, and the work of the ranch had to be done by someone who would actually do it. Cole Harrison looked at her for a long moment with those unhurried eyes. And then he did something that no man at the Whitmore gathering had ever done to Evelyn Carter in all the years she had attended them. He nodded, simply, seriously, as if what she had told him was worthy of respect. "That's a considerable undertaking for one person," he said. "I'm not one person," she said. "I have 2 ranch hands. But yes, it's considerable." "The cornbread makes more sense now," he said. She didn't understand that, and her expression said so. "A woman who's been awake since before dawn doing real work," he said. "She's going to eat at a gathering. She's not going to stand around pretending she isn't hungry." Evelyn felt something strange move through her chest. Not warmth exactly. More like the particular feeling of hearing something true that you have never heard said out loud before. A thing you knew, but had never been given permission to know. She didn't say anything. "I apologize," he said, and she saw that he meant it. "That was too familiar. We've only just met." "No," she said before she'd decided to say it. "No, you're right. I was hungry. I worked this morning. Then I hoped the food was worth it." He settled his hat back on his head, turning to go, and then stopped. "Miss Carter, if you're short a hand for the fence repair, I have a man who's between assignments. Good worker. Wouldn't cost you anything. I owe your father a courtesy from a land deal 2 years back. It'd settle the account." She looked at him. "I don't know what land deal you're referring to," she said carefully. "I'll speak to your father about it." He tipped his hat. "It was a pleasure to meet you." And then he was gone, moving back into the crowd, and Clara was there almost immediately at Evelyn's elbow watching him go. "Was he talking to you?" Clara said. "Apparently." "About what?" "Cornbread," Evelyn said. "And fence repair." Clara looked at her, then at the retreating figure of Cole Harrison, then back at Evelyn. "Cornbread," she repeated, as if the word had personally offended her. "He liked it," Evelyn said. She didn't think about him again, or she tried not to. There was too much work for thinking about men she would not see again. Men who had been perfectly polite for 5 minutes at a Sunday gathering, and would go home and be perfectly polite to the next woman they encountered, and that would be the end of it. She had been through enough of those 5-minute conversations to understand what they were. Courtesy without content, the social obligation of a decent man to speak to every person at a gathering, not just the attractive ones. The north fence took her and her hired hand, old Reuben, 2 full days to repair properly. The heat was relentless. She worked in the morning and rested in the worst of the afternoon and went back out when the temperature dropped enough to be manageable, which in that summer of 1887 was not until well past 5 o'clock. She wore her oldest work clothes and a hat that had belonged to her father, and she didn't think about what she looked like doing it. She was 3 posts into the second day's work when she heard the horse. She straightened up, squinting against the sun. A rider was coming along the north boundary line, not on the Carter land, but on the wide dirt track that ran alongside it. The old cattle trail that connected the south properties to the Miller Creek Road. She watched the rider approach with the unhurried assessment of a woman who had grown up reading strangers on horseback, because in her experience, strangers on horseback were usually either bringing news or bringing trouble, and it was useful to have some idea which before they arrived. How was tall in the saddle, dark hat. She recognized him before she wanted to. Cole Harrison pulled his horse to a stop on the other side of the fence line and looked at the work she was doing with what appeared to be genuine professional interest. "You got 3 posts replaced since this morning," he said. Evelyn stared at him. "Were you watching this morning?" she asked. "I rode past on my way to Miller Creek. Didn't stop because you were busy." He got down off the horse with the easy movement of a man who had been getting down off horses his entire life. "I told you I'd speak to your father about the fence hand." "And did you?" "Last evening. He said you'd already started the repair and probably wouldn't want help." "He knows me. He said that too." Cole stood on his side of the fence, looking at the work, not at her. "He also said you'd been doing this kind of thing alone for 4 years, and he wishes you wouldn't have to." Evelyn set down her post-hole digger. "My father said that." "He did." Cole looked at her then. "He said it the way people say things they don't know how to say to the person they mean." She felt the strange pressure in her chest again. The one she didn't have a name for. "Why are you here, Mr. Harrison?" "I brought the man I mentioned. He's down at the south corner waiting to see if you want him." He paused. "And I came to ask you something if you're willing." "Ask." "Do you always work where nobody can see you?" It was so direct, so simple. She opened her mouth to give him the practical answer that the north fence was on the far boundary that she worked, where the work needed to be done, that there was nothing deliberate about the location, and then she stopped. Because it wasn't true. Or it wasn't the whole truth. "When people look at me," she said, and she could hear her own voice come out steadier than she felt, "they usually see what they don't like first." I was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that wasn't discomfort, but something closer to thought. "That tells me more about the people looking," he said, "than about what they're looking at." She picked up her post-hole digger. "Send your man around to the south corner," she said. "I'll show him what needs doing." Clara noticed. Clara always noticed. It was Evelyn had come to understand over years of living beside her not merely vanity, it was survival. Clara had grown up learning that attention was the only currency she could reliably earn, and she had become an expert at tracking who had it and who was taking it away from her. Cole Harrison came by the Carter Ranch 3 more times in the 2 weeks following the Whitmore gathering. The first time he came to speak to George about a water access arrangement that apparently involved some grazing rights on the Miller Creek boundary. Evelyn was out in the yard when he arrived. They spoke for about 3 minutes about the mare that had gone lame the week before, because she had mentioned it to Reuben within his hearing, and he had wanted to know the outcome. She told him. He asked the right questions. He left to find her father. Clara appeared in the doorway of the house approximately 4 minutes after his horse arrived in the yard and remained there until he left. The second time he came to return a piece of equipment that Reuben had apparently lent to one of his workers. He found Evelyn in the barn working on a colt's foreleg, and he stayed for 20 minutes watching her work, asking questions about the colt's injury that were not the questions of a man making conversation, but of a man who was actually interested in the answers. "You're not what I would have expected," he said at one point. She didn't look up from the leg she was wrapping. "What did you expect?" "I'm not sure. The county talks about the Carter women. I'd formed some impressions." "The county talks about Clara," Evelyn said. "That's different." "I know that now." She looked up at him then. He was watching her with that particular expression she had noticed at the Whitmore gathering, direct, serious, without performance. "Mr. Harrison." "Cole." She stopped. "Cole," she said after a moment. "What is it you're after?" I was quiet for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just honest. "I'm not entirely sure," he said. "I've been in this county for 6 weeks. I've met most of the people worth meeting. And you're the most capable person I've come across, and the one person who seems least interested in making sure I've noticed that." Evelyn looked at him for a long time. "The colt's going to need the wrapping changed tomorrow," she said. "Thank you for bringing Reuben's equipment back." He left, but he came back. "Joel," Clara said the night after the 3rd visit. "He keeps coming to see you." They were sitting on the porch in the cooling-off hour before dark, shelling beans the way they sometimes did in summer when the house was still too warm. "He comes to see Father," Evelyn said. "Evelyn." Evelyn looked at her. Clara's beautiful face was doing something complicated. There was the jealousy. Evelyn could read it the way she read weather, the particular brightness in Clara's eyes that meant competition had been identified. But there was something else underneath it. Something that looked, if Evelyn was honest, like genuine confusion. "He barely looks at me," Clara said. It came out sounding more hurt than she had probably intended. Evelyn didn't know what to say to that. "Men always look at me," Clara continued. "At the Whitmore gathering, at the church social, at every, they always look at me first. And then, if you're there, they look at you to decide if they need to be polite, and then they look back at me." She paused. "He didn't do that. Maybe he's just not that kind of man." "What kind?" "The kind who's looking for the most beautiful woman in the room." Clara stared at her. "What's he looking for then?" Evelyn set down her bowl of beans and looked out at the yard at the last of the evening light going orange over the fence line. "I don't know," she said. It was mostly true. "Are you Evelyn? Are you being careful?" Evelyn looked at her. "Careful of what?" Of getting your hopes up, of he's a wealthy man, he's handsome. He could have anyone in the county, women much more—" She stopped herself, but Evelyn had heard the rest of it in the pause. "Women much more like what a man like him should want." "Clara," Evelyn said quietly, "I am 25 years old. I have been managing this ranch for 4 years. I have been listening to what the town thinks I should settle for since I was 12 years old." She picked up her bowl of beans again. "I am being careful. I am always careful. And I am tired of being careful." Clara didn't say anything else, but her eyes followed the direction of Miller Creek Road for a long time after that, in the way that eyes follow the road, where something worth having has gone. The thing about Cole Harrison. The thing that Evelyn understood slowly over the course of those 2 weeks, in the way that understanding comes when you are not expecting. It was not that he was kind. Plenty of men were kind to her. Reuben was kind. Old Silas Whitmore was kind. Reverend Marsh was kind. The thing about Cole Harrison was that he was not performing kindness. He was paying attention. There was a difference. A vast, unmistakable difference between a man who was kind to a woman because it cost him nothing and looked well to others, and a man who was paying attention because something about her had caught him genuinely off guard. The second visit, when he had stayed 20 minutes in the barn, he had asked about the colt's injury because he had noticed when he arrived that she was favoring her right wrist slightly, and he wanted to know if she'd hurt herself in the work. And when she explained that the wrist was an old injury from a fence-cutting accident 3 years back, and not a new one. He had listened to the full explanation without interrupting, and said, when she was done, "You should have Reuben do the heavy post work on fence days. It's not weakness to assign labor where it makes sense." Nobody had ever said that to her before. Not her father, who accepted the work she did without asking what it cost her. Not Clara, who was not interested in the practical details of her life. Not anyone. He had said it the way he said everything, like it was a simple practical observation, nothing more or less. But it sat in her chest for days afterward, the way simple truths do when they find you in the place you didn't know was empty. The afternoon. Before the thing happened, the thing that would change the shape of that summer, irrevocably. Evelyn was in the yard when she saw the buggy coming up the road from town. It was Richard Wallace's buggy. She recognized it by the black lacquer and the matched gray horses, because Richard Wallace was the kind of man who owned things specifically so that other people would recognize them. She set down what she was doing and stood very still and watched the buggy pull up to the front of the house. Richard Wallace was 54 years old and owned more land in Harding County than anyone except possibly Cole Harrison. He had been married twice. His first wife had left, and the county said not a word against her for it, which said everything. His second wife had died. The county said a great deal about that in the careful way people say things they cannot prove. How was a large man, well-dressed with the specific confidence of a person who has confused being accommodated with being respected. He stepped down from the buggy and looked at Evelyn in the yard. "Miss Carter," he said. "Is your father in?" "I'll find out," she said. She went inside. Her father was in the sitting room, and he looked up when she came in with an expression she had not seen on his face before. Or not in the combination that was there now. Guilt and relief and something that looked terribly like hope. "Wallace is here," she said. "I know." George Carter set down his papers and stood up. He was thinner than he had been a year ago. She had noticed that, and not said anything, the way she didn't say things she wasn't ready to have confirmed. "Evelyn, I need you to—" "What's happening, Papa?" He looked at her for a long moment. George Carter, who had built this ranch on heartbreak and hard work, who had raised her as best he knew how, who had never looked at her with anything but the slightly baffled love of a man who had been given something he didn't entirely know how to hold. "I need you to come in and sit down," he said. "There's something I should have told you sooner." The debt was $4,700. It had been building for 3 years quietly, the way these things build when a proud man cannot bring himself to tell his family that the land that was supposed to save them was instead sinking them. Bad seasons. A cattle illness that had taken 30 head in the winter of 1885. A loan that had seemed reasonable at the time and had compounded in ways that the bank had been patient about, and then suddenly was no longer patient about. Richard Wallace had purchased the debt 2 weeks ago. Evelyn sat in the chair across from her father and felt the room very precisely. The weight of the air, the light coming through the window, the sound of Richard Wallace's voice from the hallway where he was waiting with a patience that was not the patience of a generous man, but the patience of a man who was certain of what he was going to get. "He'll forgive the debt," her father said. He could not look at her directly. "All of it. The ranch stays ours. Nobody loses anything." She knew what came next. She could feel it approaching like the particular pressure in the air before a storm. "In exchange for what?" she said. George Carter finally looked at her. "He wants a wife," he said. He's spoken to Clara." Clara agreed. "Clara agreed to what?" "To recommend the arrangement. To speak to you about—" Evelyn stood up. She stood up slowly, the way she did everything with the solid, grounded deliberateness of a woman who did not move without intention. She stood up, and she looked at her father, and she watched him read in her face the full weight of what he had just told her. "Clara arranged this," she said. She was trying to help. "Clara arranged for Richard Wallace to purchase our debt and offered me as the settlement, and she did not tell me." She said each word separately, with the precision of a person picking their way across uncertain ground. "And you agreed." "Evelyn, did you agree?" Her father looked at his hands. She walked out of the room. She walked past Richard Wallace in the hallway, past his expensive suit and his assured expression and his certainty, without looking at him. She went through the kitchen and out the back door, and she stood behind the barn in the full heat of the afternoon, and she breathed. She stood there for a long time. She thought about the dress her mother had made, the one she had mentioned once wanting to burn. She thought about the Sunday gathering and the lemonade table, and a man who had looked at her with eyes that were actually seeing her. She thought about the north fence, the one she had fixed, that she had done herself mostly in the heat because something needed doing, and she was the person who would do it. She had always been the person who did what needed doing. The question that pressed against her now standing behind the barn, in the worst afternoon of her life, was whether that would ever mean anything. Whether being capable and strong and willing and present would ever add up to a life that was hers. Or whether she was always going to be the Carter girl that nobody chose until someone decided to use her for something practical. She heard the sound of a horse on the north track. She didn't turn around. "Miss Carter." Cole Harrison's voice. Quiet, no urgency, but present. She didn't answer. "Reuben told me Wallace's buggy was here." A pause. "He said your father looked like a man who'd signed his name to something he regretted." She turned around. Cole Harrison was on the other side of the fence. He had not gotten down from his horse. He was looking at her with those steady eyes, and he was reading her face the way he had read the north pasture, with the attention of someone who was actually looking for what was there, not what he expected to find. "How much do you know?" she said. "Enough," he said. "I've been in this county long enough to know what Wallace does with the debts he buys." Evelyn looked at him. She had been careful all her life. She had been careful the way her mother had taught her the careful of a woman who had been told that wanting too much was dangerous, that hoping was a liability, that the world had a certain picture of her, and it was safer to stay inside its frame. She was so tired of being careful. "I wants to marry me," she said. "My cousin arranged it without telling me, in exchange for the debt." She said it clearly without performance, the way she said everything when she had decided to stop softening it. "My father hasn't refused." Cole Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he got down off his horse. He came to the fence, not over it, not yet, but to it. Close enough that she could see the expression on his face clearly, without the distance the horse had put between them. "Miss Carter," he said. "Evelyn. First name, deliberate. I have something I need to say to you, and I need you to hear it straight." She waited. "You are not a debt settlement," he said. "You are not a problem someone else gets to solve by handing you to a man who'll use you like he uses everything else he buys." His voice was still quiet. It was always quiet. But there was something underneath it now, something that was not anger exactly, but was the thing that anger comes from in a person who has learned to keep it controlled. "And I am not going to stand here and watch that happen." Evelyn looked at him for a very long time. "What are you going to do about it?" she said. He looked back at her. "Whatever I have to," he said. Cole Harrison did not move from the fence. He stood on the other side of it, with the same stillness he brought to everything, that particular quality of a man who had learned somewhere in the long years of his life that standing still when everything else was moving was its own kind of power. He looked at Evelyn, and she looked at him, and the afternoon heat pressed down on both of them equally, the way heat does, the way it doesn't care who you are or what you're carrying. "Whatever you have to," she repeated. She said it quietly, not mocking him, testing the weight of it. "That's a large thing to say to a woman you've known for 2 weeks." "It is," he agreed. "Men say large things," she said, "especially when they're standing outside the problem." "I know that too." She looked at him. "So what does whatever I have to actually mean, Cole? Because right now, there's a man sitting in my father's sitting room who has a piece of paper that says he owns what we owe, and my cousin arranged it, and my father hasn't told him no. And I need to know if you're offering something real, or if you're offering me something that feels real because you feel sorry for me." The word hit the air between them and stayed there. Cole didn't flinch from it. "I don't feel sorry for you," he said. "I've never felt sorry for you. That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" He was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of a man searching for the right words to manage her. The quiet of a man being honest about something he hadn't planned to say out loud yet. "I've been watching you for 2 weeks, he said. "And I don't use that word lightly. I mean, I have been paying attention the way I pay attention to things that matter. You fixed that north fence mostly alone. You treated that colt's leg with more skill than the county vet. You fed your ranch hands before you ate yourself at the Whitmore gathering. You said 4 words to your cousin when she tried to make you feel small about your dress, and those 4 words shut the whole thing down. And the one time you talked about yourself honestly, when you told me what people see when they look at you, you said it straight, no self-pity, no performance." He paused. "I've been in this county 6 weeks and I've met 40 people. You're the only one I keep thinking about." Evelyn stood very still. Something in her chest was doing something she didn't have a word for. Not warmth, more like pressure. The kind of pressure that happens when something that has been closed for a long time is being asked to open. "That doesn't solve the problem in my father's sitting room," she said. "No," he said. "But it explains why I'm standing at your fence instead of minding my own business." She looked at him for a long moment. "Go home, Cole." He didn't move. "Evelyn, I need to think," she said. "And I can't think clearly with you standing there saying things like that." She turned away from him toward the barn, and then stopped without turning back. "I'm not a woman who needs rescuing. I need you to know that before anything else." "I know that," he said. "Then act like it." She walked into the barn. "I'll figure out what to do about Wallace myself." She heard him stand at the fence for another minute. Then she heard the creak of his saddle as he remounted. Then the sound of his horse moving back up the north track. She stood in the cool of the barn and breathed. She pressed her hands flat against the wood of the nearest post and breathed until the pressure in her chest shifted into something she could manage. Then she went back inside to find her father. George Carter was still in the sitting room when she came back through. Richard Wallace was with him now, seated, a glass of her father's good whiskey in his hand, with the ease of a man who assumed hospitality was owed to him. He looked up when she entered with the specific kind of attention that wasn't interest so much as inventory, the look of a man assessing something he was considering purchasing. She had seen that look before on men at the Whitmore gatherings. She had learned to keep her face empty when she felt it. She kept her face empty now. "Miss Carter," Wallace said, rising slightly from his chair, in a gesture that was technically courtesy and felt nothing like it. "Your father tells me you're the one who manages the working end of this ranch." "I am," she said. "Industrious," he said in the tone of a man giving a compliment he didn't entirely mean. "That'll be useful." The word useful sat between them, like something left on the floor. "Mr. Wallace," she said, "I understand you've purchased a debt that my family owes." "I have." "And that you've proposed an arrangement to my father." "A fair one," he said. "The debt is forgiven. The ranch remains in Carter hands. Your family keeps everything they've built." He paused with the satisfaction of a man presenting a gift. "All it requires is me," she said. He blinked. He hadn't expected her to say it that plainly. "A marriage," he said. "Between people of compatible standing. You'd want for nothing, Miss Carter. My house is well maintained. I don't doubt your house is comfortable," she said. "That's not what I'm discussing." He looked at her father. George Carter was looking at his hands. "I haven't agreed to anything," Evelyn said. "My father may have been spoken to, but I have not agreed, and I won't be agreeing today." Wallace's expression shifted not to anger exactly, but to something that bordered on it. The particular expression of a man who is accustomed to arrangements proceeding the way he has arranged them. "Miss Carter, I think you may not fully understand the financial situation your family." $4,700, she said. "I understand it exactly, and I understand that you purchased that debt 2 weeks ago, which means you've been planning this conversation for at least that long. Which means someone in this house told you we were in difficulty before my father told me." She let that sit for a moment. "Mr. Wallace, I think we're done for today." He stood up, slowly. The way powerful men stand up when they want you to remember how much space they take. "I'll give you time to consider," he said. "That's a courtesy, Miss Carter, not an obligation. The debt comes due in 30 days. You'd be wise to think carefully about your options." "I'll do that," she said. She saw him to the door. She watched his black lacquer buggy roll back down the road toward town. Then she turned around and found Clara standing in the hallway. Clara was holding the frame of the doorway with both hands, the way a person holds something when they need something to hold. Her beautiful face was arranged in the specific expression she used when she was about to say something she'd rehearsed, composed, slightly softened the expression of a woman preparing to be reasonable. Evelyn looked at her for a long moment. "Don't," Evelyn said. Clara's expression flickered. "Evelyn, don't." She walked past her toward the kitchen because she needed to move, and she needed to do something with her hands, and the kitchen was the place she had always gone when she needed both of those things at once. She filled the kettle and put it on the stove and stood with her back to the room. Clara followed her. "I was trying to save the ranch," Clara said. "I was trying to save all of us. By selling me. By finding a solution. By—" Clara's voice pitched upward slightly, the particular register of a woman who is feeling accused and is not entirely innocent. "You know what would happen if we lost this land, Evelyn? Your father would have nothing. We would have nothing. Where would we go?" "Where would I go?" Evelyn said. "After you'd married me off to Richard Wallace." "He's not a cruel man." Evelyn turned around. She turned around, and she looked at Clara with the full weight of 25 years of shared rooms and shared meals and shared silences that were never about the same things on both sides. And she looked at her without the careful blankness she had maintained for Wallace, without the emotional management she applied to every public interaction. She just looked at her. Clara stopped talking. "Hi is precisely that kind of man," Evelyn said. "And you know it. You know it the way I know it, and the way everyone in this county who is honest with themselves knows it. The way his first wife knew it when she left." She kept her voice level. "You knew exactly what you were arranging. And you did it without telling me. You went behind my back to a man I would never have chosen, and you offered him me, and you dressed it up as helping." Clara's composure was cracking, which was rare. Evelyn had seen it happen perhaps 4 times in the years they'd lived together. Each time it revealed something underneath the beauty that was smaller and more frightened than the beauty suggested. "I didn't know what else to do." "You could have told me," Evelyn said. "You could have come to me first." "You would have said no." "Yes," Evelyn said. "I would have." "And then what? We lose everything. And then we find another way." She turned back to the stove. "That's what I do, Clara. I find other ways. That's been my job in this family for 4 years, and you know it. You have always known it. And instead of coming to me, you went around me because you knew that if you gave me the problem, I would solve it in a way that didn't include Richard Wallace, and that solution was the one you'd already decided on." The kettle began to build toward a whistle. "He would have been generous," Clara said, quiet now. The rehearsed composure was entirely gone. What was left sounded younger, smaller. Almost like the 11-year-old girl Evelyn had shared her room with for the first time, who had cried at night for a week and pretended she hadn't. "He told me he would take care of you, that you'd have a good house, and—" "I don't want a good house that belongs to a man who bought me," Evelyn said. "I want a life that's mine." Clara was quiet for a long time. Then so quietly that Evelyn almost missed it under the sound of the kettle. "Nobody was going to give you that, Evelyn. I was trying to give you the best version of what you were going to get anyway." Evelyn took the kettle off the stove. She poured the water. She did it slowly, carefully, the way she did hard things. "Get out of my kitchen," she said. "Not forever, but right now." Clara left. She didn't sleep that night. She lay in her bed and looked at the ceiling and turned the problem over the way she turned all problems, methodically from every angle, until she had identified what she was actually working with beneath the surface of what it looked like. The debt was $4,700 in 30 days. To a man who had structured the entire situation to leave her exactly one exit. Clara had arranged it. Her father had allowed it. And both of them had done so believing at some level that the exit Wallace was offering was the best she could hope for. That was the thing underneath the problem. That was what sat in her chest like something that wouldn't shift. Not the debt. Not Wallace. Not even Clara's betrayal, which was real and would take time to address and would not be forgotten quickly. The thing that kept her awake was the simple, devastating recognition that the people who loved her in their own limited, frightened way had looked at her life and decided that Richard Wallace was the best it could offer her. She thought about what Cole had said at the fence. "The most capable person I've come across. The one person who seems least interested in making sure I've noticed." She thought about the way he had looked at her in the barn, asking questions about the colt's leg that were real questions, wanting real answers. The way he had noticed her wrist. The way he had said in passing that it wasn't weakness to assign labor where it made sense. She got up at 3 in the morning. She went to the kitchen, and she sat at the table in the dark, and she made herself a list, the practical kind, the only kind she trusted. What she had. What she needed. What the actual gap was between them. By 4 in the morning, she had the outline of something. It wasn't a perfect something. It had risks, and it required conversations she did not want to have, and it depended on a person she had known for 2 weeks, in a way that terrified her precisely because she was beginning to trust it. But it was hers. She went out to feed the horses. She rode to the Ridgeback property, the old Devereaux land Cole had bought on Miller Creek, at 7 in the morning, because she had decided that early was better than strategic, and that arriving at a man's property at a reasonable working hour was not the same as chasing him. She told herself that several times on the ride over. The Ridgeback was larger than she had imagined from the road. The main house was older, but well-maintained, in the way that practical people maintain things, no ornament, but nothing neglected either. She could see the marks of recent work everywhere. New fence posts on the east line, a repaired section of the barn roof, a paddock that had been cleared and was clearly being prepared for something. A man she didn't know came out of the barn when she rode up. "Help you, miss? I'm looking for Cole Harrison, Evelyn Carter from the Carter Ranch east of here." The man's expression shifted with recognition. "He's in the back pasture. Give me a minute." He went. She waited. Cole came through the gate from the back pasture about 10 minutes later, still pulling on his jacket hat already on. He stopped when he saw her on horseback in his yard. "You rode over," he said. "You said whatever you had to." He looked at her. "I did. I need to know what that means practically," she said. "Because I spent last night working out what I need and what I have and what the gap is. And the gap is $4,700 and 29 days. He came closer, not rushing it, walking the way he did everything. "Tell me your plan," he said. She told him. She had worked it through carefully. There was a land parcel on the Carter property's south side, 40 acres, that had never been productive because the soil there was shallow and the water access was poor. But it bordered the Miller Creek Road, and a man who had just established a ranch on Miller Creek might find value in that border access for cattle drive purposes. A fair purchase price for 40 acres of marginal land, even at current Texas prices, would not reach $4,700. But between that and what she could raise from selling 3 of their breeding cattle, which she had already mentally identified and priced because she had been running the Carter Ranch's numbers in her head for 4 years, she could get close. And the timing, if they moved quickly, could work. She said all of this clearly and precisely, the way she had worked it out at the kitchen table in the dark. Cole listened without interrupting. When she was done, he was quiet for a moment. "The south parcel," he said. 40 acres of shallow soil with poor water. You're offering me a bad deal and you know it." "I'm offering you a fair price for what it's actually worth," she said. "I'm not asking you to overpay for my problem. That's not what this is." "What is this?" "A business arrangement between neighbors." She met his eyes. "I'm not asking you for charity, Cole. I'm offering you something that has real value for your operation for a fair price. What I do with that money is my business." He looked at her for a long moment. "And Wallace?" "Wallace will be paid what he's owed, in full, in 29 days, and he'll have no grounds for anything else." Cole was quiet. "You rode over here at 7 in the morning, he said, "to offer me a business deal." "Yes." "You worked it out at your kitchen table in the middle of the night." "Around 3. He took his hat off and ran a hand through his hair, which was something she had not seen him do before, a gesture that looked more tired and more human than anything else she'd observed from him. He put the hat back on. "I'll pay the $4,700 directly," he said, "for the parcel and the cattle combined, and I'll take it at the fair price you've calculated, not a dollar more. But I want one condition." She stiffened. "What condition?" "That you let me be there when you tell Wallace." She stared at him. "That's your condition," she said. "That's my condition." "Why?" He looked at her steadily. "Because I want to make sure he understands clearly that the debt has been settled and that your family's land is not a subject he has any further standing in. And because a man like Wallace sometimes needs to hear those things from another man before he'll accept them as final." She wanted to argue with that. She felt the familiar resistance rise up in her, the insistence that she could handle it herself, that she always handled it herself, that she did not need someone standing beside her to make her point land. But the honest part of her, the part that had been awake since 3 in the morning, doing math at a kitchen table, recognized what he was actually offering. Not control, not rescue, backup. "All right," she said. Something in his face shifted. Not surprise, something quieter than that. Relief, maybe, or the thing that lives next to relief in a person who had been prepared for a different answer. "I'll have the payment drawn up today," he said. "We can go to Wallace tomorrow if that suits." "It suits?" she said. She turned her horse toward the road. "Cole." "Yes." "Don't tell my father before I do." "Of course not. And don't—" She stopped. She wasn't sure how to finish it. There were too many things she didn't want him to do, most of which had nothing to do with the business arrangement and everything to do with the pressure in her chest that she was still not naming. "I know," he said quietly, as if he understood what she hadn't said. She rode home. She told her father that evening. George Carter sat in the chair he always sat in, the one near the window that had belonged to his father before him, and he listened to her explain what she had arranged. His face moved through several things while she spoke: confusion, then understanding, then something that looked very much like shame, which was the one she had been bracing for. "Evelyn," he said when she was done. "You shouldn't have had to." "No," she agreed. "I shouldn't have, but I did. I was trying to protect you. The arrangement with Wallace. Papa." She said it the way she had always said it when she needed him to actually hear her, quietly, directly, without softening it. "You were trying to solve a problem. I understand that. But the solution you chose was to give me away. And the reason you chose that solution—" She stopped. She had told herself she would say this part. She had rehearsed it at the kitchen table. "The reason is that somewhere you believe what this town believes. That the best I can hope for is to be useful to someone else's life. That my own life isn't something I'm entitled to build." George Carter looked at his daughter. His eyes were wet. She noted this without softening her position. "I don't believe that," he said. "I know you don't want to believe it," she said. "I know you love me. But you made a decision about my life without asking me because it didn't occur to you that I might have a better solution than the one you'd accepted. That's what I need you to understand." He was quiet for a long time. "I'm sorry," he said. It came out rough. The voice of a man who was not practiced at saying it and was making himself do it anyway. "Evelyn, I am sorry." She looked at him. Her father, who was thinner than he had been and older than she had prepared herself for him to be, who had built this land and lost his wife and was losing himself by inches in ways she watched and could not fix. "I know," she said. She sat down in the chair across from him. "Now listen to me. The debt is going to be paid. The land is staying. And tomorrow, I'm going to Wallace's house with Cole Harrison, and we're going to close this out properly." She folded her hands in her lap. "I need you to let me do that." "Cole Harrison," her father said. "He's Evelyn. He's a good man. I've thought so since the first time I dealt with him." "He is," she said. "Are you—" He stopped. He was not a man who asked direct questions about his daughter's personal life. It had never been his way. But something in his face was asking it anyway. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Right now, I'm focused on the $4,700. He almost smiled. Just barely. "That sounds like you." "I learned practicality somewhere," she said. She stood up to leave, and he caught her hand. Just her hand briefly, the way he had when she was small, and held it for a moment. She let him. Then she went to bed and actually slept. Clara knocked on her door before dawn. Evelyn was already awake, lying in the gray half-light, and she considered not answering. But she said, "Come in," because she had said her piece the night before, and Clara was in the complicated arithmetic of her life still family. Clara came in and sat on the edge of the bed, which was something she had not done since they were young. She was already dressed, hair loose, which meant she had been awake. She didn't say anything for a minute. Then she said, "I heard you tell Papa about Cole Harrison." "Yes." "He's buying the south parcel." "Yes." Clara was quiet. "That was smart," she said finally. "Smarter than what I did." Evelyn didn't say anything. "I thought—" Clara stopped. Started again. "I thought if I found someone who wanted you, it would solve it. I thought that was the most—" She pressed her mouth together. "I thought Wallace wanting to marry you was the best possible version of a solution." "I know you did," Evelyn said. "That's terrible, isn't it?" "It's what you believed." "It's terrible," Clara said again. And then very quietly, in the voice of someone saying something they've been afraid to say for a long time. "I've always been the one people wanted. And I think somewhere I started to believe that meant I understood how the world worked. That if someone wanted you, that was worth something. That being chosen was the most important thing." Evelyn turned her head on the pillow to look at her cousin. Clara was 22 and beautiful, and Evelyn realized now, more frightened than she had ever understood. Frightened that the beauty would stop working. Frightened of what she would be without it. Frightened of the version of her future that looked like Evelyn's, capable and capable and capable, and still somehow not enough. "Being chosen isn't the most important thing," Evelyn said. "What is—" "Choosing," Evelyn said. "Deciding for yourself what your life is worth, and what you'll accept, and what you won't." She looked back at the ceiling. I know that's harder from where you're standing. I know you've had doors open for you that I've never been able to reach. But Clara, those doors lead somewhere too. And you should know where before you walk through them. Clara didn't answer right away. Then she said, he looks at you differently than men look at me. Evelyn didn't ask who she meant. Men look at me like they're seeing something they want, Clara said. Cole Harrison looks at you like he's seeing someone he respects. I didn't know those were different things until I saw it. The sun was beginning to come through the window. Go get some sleep, Evelyn said. I'm sorry, Clara said. I know it doesn't fix it. No, Evelyn agreed. But it's a start. Clara left. Evelyn lay in the growing light and felt the shape of the day ahead, the ride to Wallace's property. Cole Harrison, beside her, the piece of paper that would close this chapter and open whatever came next. She felt the fear of it. She felt the size of it. She felt underneath both of those things something she hadn't felt in a long time. Like the life ahead was hers to decide. She got up. She pulled on her work clothes. She went out to feed the horses in the last of the morning quiet, while Harding County was still asleep, and the sky was doing the thing it did in summer at dawn, going from gray to pink to the kind of gold that made you believe just for a moment that the day was going to be fair. Jack pressed his nose against her shoulder. She stood still long enough to let him. Then she heard hooves on the north track earlier than she'd expected, and she knew without turning around who it was. Cole Harrison pulled up on his side of the fence. You're early, she said. I wanted to make sure you hadn't changed your mind, he said. She looked at him. I don't change my mind, she said. Once I've made it up. I know, he said. I just wanted to see it. She picked up the feed bucket. Give me 20 minutes, she said. Then we'll go. They rode to Wallace's property side by side, not speaking much. That was something Evelyn had noticed about Cole from the beginning. He didn't fill silence with noise. Most men she had known used words the way Clara used her smile as a tool, as a way of managing the space between themselves and other people. Cole used silence the way he used everything else deliberately, and only when it served something. She was grateful for it this morning. Her hands were steady on the reins. Her mind was not. She had run the numbers again at dawn, standing in the kitchen with her coffee going cold beside her. Everything held. The south parcel, the cattle, the payment, it all held. She had done the work. She knew the work was good. What she hadn't accounted for sitting at that kitchen table in the dark was what it would feel like to ride toward Richard Wallace's house with the solution in her pocket, knowing that the solution existing didn't mean the conversation would be simple. Men like Wallace did not lose gracefully. She had understood that in the abstract. She was understanding it more concretely with every mile. You've gone quiet, Cole said. I'm always quiet. You're a different kind of quiet right now. She looked at him sideways. He was watching the road ahead, not her, which somehow made it easier to answer honestly. I'm thinking about how he's going to react, she said. How do you think he will? I think he'll be angry. I think he'll try to find a reason the payment doesn't satisfy the terms. I think he'll make it about something other than the money, because the money was never really what it was about. She paused. And I think he's going to look at you standing there and decide that I'm being managed by someone else, and use that to make me feel like I haven't actually done anything myself. Cole was quiet for a moment. And when he does that, he said, I'm going to let him finish, she said. And then I'm going to tell him what I think. And then we're going to leave. That's a good plan, he said. You're not going to tell me to let you handle it. He looked at her then. Brief, direct, the look she'd come to expect from him, the one that didn't perform anything. Why would I do that? She didn't answer, because the honest answer was that every other man in her life, faced with a situation that required standing beside her rather than in front of her, had eventually stepped in front of her. Her father. The county men who meant well. Even Reuben, who respected her more than most, sometimes talked to her as if she needed the path cleared before she could walk it. She didn't say any of that. Cole seemed to understand it anyway. You're doing this, he said. I'm here because you allowed it. That's what I understood when you agreed to the condition. She faced forward. Good, she said. Wallace's house was large in the way that men like Wallace built large, not for comfort, but for the statement of it. The grounds were well kept. 2 men were working near the barn when they rode in, and one of them went inside at the sight of them, which told her Wallace had people watching for arrivals. He came out before they had dismounted. He looked at Cole first. The quick, involuntary assessment of a man who had just registered a competitor. Then he looked at Evelyn, and something shifted in his expression. Not surprise exactly, but the recalibration of a man adjusting his approach. "Miss Carter," he said, "and Mr. Harrison." The second name landed with the careful weight of a man pretending to be neutral. "This is unexpected." "I don't imagine it is," Evelyn said. She dismounted. Cole dismounted beside her and stayed where he was, a step back and to her left. Present. Not leading. She had noticed that. She registered it without looking at him. "I've come to settle the debt," she said. She took the folded paper from inside her jacket, the payment draft drawn from Cole's account at the Harding County Bank, made out to Richard Wallace for $4,700 executed that morning before dawn. In full, as of today. Wallace took the paper. He unfolded it slowly, which was a performance a man who needed time to think, presenting himself as a man who was simply being thorough. He looked at the paper for a long time. "This is drawn on Harrison's account," he said. "It is," Evelyn said. "Mr. Harrison purchased 40 acres on the south boundary of our property and 3 head of breeding cattle. The payment is the product of that sale. The debt is mine to settle, and I am settling it. With his money. With money I earned through a transaction I arranged," she said. "The source of a payment doesn't change what it pays." Wallace looked at Cole. Cole looked back at him with the specific expression of a man who has absolutely nothing to prove and knows it. "Mr. Harrison," Wallace said, "I'm not sure you understand what you've stepped into." "I understand it well enough," Cole said. He said it quietly. Just that. Wallace looked back at Evelyn. And now the performance of neutrality was slipping just at the edges. She could see it in the set of his jaw, the way his hand had tightened slightly on the paper. "Miss Carter, this arrangement is concluded," she said. "The terms of the debt required payment in full within 30 days. Today is day 3. You have the payment in your hand. The debt is cleared. I'll need to verify this with the bank. You can do that this afternoon. The draft is good. I was there when it was written." She held his gaze. "Mr. Wallace, I want to be clear with you about something." He waited. He was still holding the performance together, but barely. "You purchased that debt because you believed my family had no options," she said. "You structured the arrangement so that the only exit you'd left us led through you. That was deliberate, and I think you know that I know it, and I want you to know that I know it clearly, not in a general way, but specifically, I know what you did and why you did it and what you expected to get." She kept her voice level. Not angry. Clearer than anger. "The answer is no. No, the debt is paid, and this conversation is over." For a moment, Wallace said nothing. Then he said, "You're a stubborn woman, Miss Carter." "I'm a precise one," she said. "There's a difference." He looked at Cole again. One more time. The look that was still trying to frame this as something happening to Evelyn, rather than something she had done, still trying to find the angle where she was being handled, instead of handling it herself. Cole tipped his hat. Barely. The precise minimum of courtesy that a man owes another man when there is nothing more to be said. Wallace went inside without another word. Evelyn stood in his yard for a moment after the door closed. She felt the release of it move through her, not loud, not dramatic, the way relief rarely is when it finally arrives. Just a slow, quiet unclenching of something she had been holding since 3 a.m. 2 days ago. Since the sitting room with her father. Since the moment she had understood what had been arranged without her. "Evelyn," Cole said. "I'm fine," she said. "Give me a second." He gave her the second. Then she turned around and walked to her horse and mounted, and they rode back toward the main road together, and she didn't speak until they had cleared the Wallace property line and the house was behind them and the open road was ahead. "He's going to tell people," she said. "He is," Cole agreed. "He's going to tell people that you paid it, that you stepped in and solved my family's problem. People can think what they want. In this county, she said, what people think becomes what's true. You know that. Cole rode in silence for a moment. What do you want to do about it? I want to tell the story myself before he tells it his way. She looked at the road ahead. I want people to know what actually happened. The Whitmore gathering is Saturday, he said. She looked at him. I was going to mention it, he said. If you were planning to attend. Were you planning to attend? I am now, he said. She looked forward again. Something warm moved through her chest, not the pressure she had been carrying for days, but a different thing. Quieter. The feeling of someone choosing to stand in the same direction as you. She didn't say anything about it, but she didn't push it away either. The days between Wallace's house and the Saturday gathering were not quiet ones. The county talked. She had known it would. Harding County talked, the way it breathed constantly and without effort, and news of Richard Wallace's debt arrangement had reached enough people through enough channels that by Wednesday it had been through 3 versions and acquired details that had never happened. The version she heard from Reuben on Wednesday morning was that Cole Harrison had purchased the Carter Ranch outright to save it from foreclosure. The version she heard from Mrs. Hobbs, who appeared at the edge of the property on Thursday with a basket of preserves and a great deal of pointed sympathy, was that Cole had paid Wallace directly because George Carter had asked him to as part of a separate land arrangement. The version that Clara reported from the dry goods store on Friday was the worst, that Cole Harrison was paying Evelyn's debts because they were engaged, and that the engagement had been arranged between Cole and George Carter some weeks back without Evelyn's knowledge. That one made her set down what she was holding and breathe very carefully for approximately 30 seconds. Who said that? She asked Clara. Martha Hobbs. Who heard it from? I don't need the chain, Evelyn said. I need to know how far it spread. Half the county, Clara said. She was watching Evelyn with the careful attention she'd been giving her since the morning she'd sat on the edge of the bed. Something had shifted between them, not repaired, not entirely, but moved. Like furniture that had been in the same position so long that moving it revealed the marks on the floor underneath. Evelyn, are you? I'm fine, Evelyn said. I need to talk to Cole. She rode to Ridgeback that afternoon. He came out of the barn when she arrived, hatless, which she had not seen before, which made him look both younger and more tired than the composed figure she had built in her mind across 2 weeks of careful observation. You've heard, he said. I've heard the engagement version, she said, and she watched his face, and the face did something quick and complicated that she filed away without analyzing. Have you? This morning, he said. I was going to come speak to you. I got here first. She dismounted. Cole, I need to know what you want to do about this, because the story that's circulating makes it sound like you and my father arranged my life between you, and that is exactly the thing I... She stopped. She was not going to lose her composure over this. She had not lost it at Wallace's house, and she would not lose it now. That story is the opposite of what happened, and I won't let it stand. I agree completely, he said. No hesitation. Tell me what you want to say, and I'll back every word of it. She looked at him. You're not going to tell me it doesn't matter what people think. I was going to say that what people think matters to you, which means it matters, he said. And that you're right that the story being told is wrong, and that you have every reason to correct it. She stood in his yard in the afternoon heat and looked at this man who kept doing the specific thing that no one else in her life had reliably done, who kept seeing what she was actually saying instead of the surface of it. Saturday, she said. The Whitmore gathering. I'll be there, he said. I need you to let me do the talking. The not-quite smile appeared, the one that lived just before the real one. Miss Carter, he said, when have I not let you do the talking? She almost smiled back, almost. Don't be charming, she said. I'm being serious. I know you are, he said. That's why I'm letting you be. Saturday arrived with the particular bright mercilessness of a Texas summer morning that had decided to be beautiful regardless of what was happening underneath it. The Whitmore lawn was more crowded than usual. Evelyn noticed that immediately the extra bodies, the particular energy of a gathering that had acquired a subject. The way people's eyes moved when she came through the gate. The conversations that paused and resumed at a different register. They knew she was coming. Of course they did. She came alone. She had told Cole to arrive separately because arriving together would confirm the story before she had the chance to correct it. He had agreed without argument. She walked to the food tables and poured herself a glass of lemonade and let the yard absorb her presence for a few minutes. Let people look. Let the looking happen without giving them anything to attach to it. Martha Hobbs appeared at her elbow with the inevitability of rain. "Evelyn," she said warmly, which meant she had something she considered important to ask. "We were all so relieved to hear about the ranch. That Mr. Harrison is certainly well. It's very fortunate that your father had that arrangement in place." Evelyn looked at her. "There was no arrangement between my father and Mr. Harrison," she said clearly. "I arranged a land sale. I used the proceeds to pay a debt. That's what happened." Martha blinked. "But we heard—" "I know what you heard," Evelyn said. "I'm telling you what occurred. If you'd like to share that with anyone who has questions, I'd appreciate it." She walked away before Martha could regroup. She did the same thing twice more in the next 20 minutes, once with the group of women near the pie table, once with old Silas Whitmore himself, who had the decency to look slightly embarrassed by the version of the story he had been carrying. Each time she said it the same way, in the same words, without heat, without defensiveness. Just facts. Just the truth. She was on her third glass of lemonade when she felt the shift in the yard again. Cole had arrived. He came through the gate, the same way he had the first Sunday, unhurried hat on, with that quality of settled weight. But this time, the yard's reaction was different, more charged. People were watching the path between him and Evelyn with the transparent interest of a crowd that was waiting for a scene. She kept her eyes on her lemonade. He crossed the yard and came to stand beside her. Not dramatically, not with any announcement, just beside her. "You've been busy," he said quietly. "I've been correcting the record," she said. "How's it going?" Martha Hobbs looks like she swallowed something disagreeable, which is a good sign. He was quiet for a moment. Then just as quietly, "Clara is here." Evelyn had seen her. Clara was standing with a group of women near the oak trees dressed in the blue silk she saved for important gatherings. Her face arranged in the particular careful composure of a woman who was managing something publicly. Their eyes had met briefly when Evelyn arrived. Clara had looked away first. "I know," Evelyn said. "Is that going to be a problem?" "Clara is always a problem," Evelyn said. "And she's the only family I have besides my father, so I manage it." He looked at her sidelong. "That's generous." "It's practical," she said. "Same thing sometimes." And then she saw it. She saw it because she was watching the yard with the attention she had learned to give it over years of navigating it. The movement beneath the surface, the currents, the way information traveled through a crowd. And she saw it before it happened, the way you sometimes see weather before it arrives. Richard Wallace had come through the gate. Howe was not alone. He had two men with him. His foreman, and a man she didn't recognize, shorter, with the look of someone who dealt in documents. A lawyer, she thought. Or something like it. Wallace moved through the crowd toward Silas Whitmore, with the deliberate directness of a man who had prepared what he was going to say. He was carrying something, a paper folded, which he passed to Whitmore with a gesture that was designed to be seen. She felt Cole go still beside her. "He's here," Cole said. "I see him." "Do you know what that document is?" "No," she said. And then, because she was honest with herself even when she didn't want to be, "But I know it isn't good." She watched Silas Whitmore read whatever Wallace had given him. Watched Whitmore's face move through several things. Watched Wallace say something to him in a low voice, something that made Whitmore look across the yard at Evelyn with an expression she couldn't read from this distance. "I need to go over there," she said. "Evelyn, I need to know what he's doing." She set down her glass. "Stay here." "I will not," he said. She looked at him. "You said you'd let me do the talking," she said. "I said I'd let you do the talking," he agreed. "I didn't say I'd let you walk into it alone." She wanted to argue. She could feel the argument ready, the familiar insistence, the pride that had gotten her this far, and also cost her in ways she was still counting. But he was already moving, and she understood in the clear-eyed way she understood most things, that this was not the moment to fight the person on her side. She moved with him. They crossed the Whitmore yard together, and the crowd parted in the way crowds do when something is about to happen. Not dramatically, not all at once, but with the particular attention of people who have been waiting for a center. "Mr. Whitmore," she said when they reached him. Silas Whitmore was 70 years old and had run the largest ranch in Harding County for 40 of them, and he was not a man who was easily rattled. But he looked rattled now, or not rattled exactly. Troubled. The expression of a man holding something he would rather have put down. "Miss Carter," he said, "I was just about to send someone for you." "What is that?" she said. She nodded toward the paper. Whitmore looked at Wallace. Wallace looked at Evelyn with the expression of a man who had been planning this since she rode away from his property. "The payment you made," Wallace said, "was made against the wrong instrument." Evelyn stared at him. "I beg your pardon. The debt your father owes." Wallace reached into his jacket and produced a second document, which he unfolded with the unhurried deliberation of a man who has practiced this. "Is not one debt, it's two. The $4,700 was one note. There's a second note for $2,060 held separately against the cattle and equipment on the Carter property. A note your father signed in February of this year." He held the paper out. "This one I don't believe you were aware of." Evelyn did not take the paper. She stood very still. She was doing the math. She was doing it immediately, the way she did everything that mattered, quickly, without showing it. $4,700 paid. $2,060 still standing. The south parcel and the 3 cattle had covered the first. There was nothing left that she had accounted for. The silence in the immediate vicinity of their small group had spread outward, the way silence does at a gathering when something real is happening. People had stopped pretending to do other things. She was aware of Cole beside her. She was aware of her own breathing. She was aware of Wallace watching her face with the attention of a man who had bet on a specific reaction and was waiting to collect. She would not give him the reaction. "Let me see it," she said. Wallace handed her the paper. She read it. Carefully, slowly, the way she read documents, not for the shape of them, but for the specifics, the language, the terms. Her father's signature at the bottom. February 14th. She remembered February. She remembered it had been a hard month, a late cold snap. The colt's injury, 2 of the ranch hands out sick. She had been managing the working side and trusting her father with the financial side, the way they had divided it, the way it had always worked. She had trusted him. She handed the paper to Cole without looking at Wallace. Cole read it. "Where did you get this?" he said. He said it in the tone of a man asking a question he already has the beginning of an answer to. "It was assigned to me by the original lender," Wallace said. "Harlan Beck over in Millbrook. Your father borrowed against the equipment in February, Miss Carter, when the first note was already in arrears. He didn't want to worry you." He didn't want to worry you. She heard those words land in the space behind her breastbone, with the specific weight of a truth that explains several other things you had never quite been able to make sense of. Her father's face in the sitting room. The particular quality of his guilt that she had read as being about the first debt, and that was, she understood now, about this one too, about all of it, about the full size of what he had kept from her. She looked at Cole. He looked back at her. His expression was controlled, but she could read underneath it, now had been able to for days, she realized, and what was underneath it was anger. The cold, quiet kind. The kind that doesn't make noise. "The note is legitimate?" he asked. "It is," Wallace said. "Executed and recorded." "And the terms?" "Due upon demand," Wallace said, "which I am making, now." The yard was fully quiet around them. She felt it, the watching the weight of 60 people who had come for a Sunday gathering and found themselves at the edge of something that was no longer a social occasion. She felt Clara somewhere behind her. She felt Silas Whitmore's discomfort. She felt the particular awfulness of being the subject of a public moment you had not chosen. She had been here before. Not like this, not with this stakes. But the quality of it being looked at, being assessed, being the thing that everyone was deciding about, she knew this landscape. She had lived in it since she was 12 years old. She breathed. "Mr. Wallace," she said, and her voice came out clean and steady, and she was grateful in that moment for everything that had taught her to do that. "You have staged this very carefully. I've done nothing but present a legitimate—" "You waited," she said. "You let us come to your property. You accepted confirmation that the first debt had been paid. You let us ride back and tell my father it was done. You let us have 3 days of believing it was over." She looked at him without flinching. "And then you came here today to this gathering in front of these people to deliver the second note, because you knew that doing it here publicly would do more damage than doing it privately." Something shifted in his expression. Just slightly. The acknowledgement of someone who has been accurately described. "The note is due," he said. "I know what it says." "Then you know you have a problem, Miss Carter." His voice dropped slightly, not for discretion, she understood, but for effect. For the specific intimacy of a man who wants you to know he is being generous by not saying the next thing louder. "The offer I made stands. The terms remain the same. All of it, both notes forgiven. In exchange for—" "No," Cole said. One word. Quiet. Absolute. Wallace looked at him. Cole was holding the document. He had been reading it while she and Wallace spoke, and now he folded it precisely along its existing creases and held it with the ease of a man who has decided what he's going to do next. "You bought both notes," Cole said. "When did you buy the second one?" "That's not—" "When?" Wallace's jaw tightened. "Last month. Before or after you approached George Carter about the first—" A pause. "Not long, but present." "Before," Wallace said. Cole nodded slowly. "So you went to Harlan Beck and Millbrook, purchased both notes, and then approached the Carter family about only one of them. Giving Evelyn the impression that solving the first debt would solve the problem." "I disclosed." "You disclosed nothing about the second note," Cole said. "To anyone in this family, until today." He looked at Wallace with the expression of a man who has been watching something happen for a while and has finished being patient about it. "That's not a business arrangement. That's a trap." Wallace opened his mouth. "I want the second note," Cole said. "Name your price." The yard made a sound not loud, but present. The collective intake of a crowd that has just understood that the stakes have changed. Wallace stared at him. "You can't name it. That note isn't for sale." "Everything is for sale," Cole said. "That's the world you operate in. You purchased those notes because they could buy you something you wanted. Tell me what it takes to buy them from you, and we'll have a transaction. Or don't, and we'll involve Silas." He glanced at Whitmore, who straightened slightly. "And the county record office, and we'll let everyone here examine exactly how you came to hold both notes, and why only one of them was disclosed to the Carter family. Your choice." Silence. Real silence. The kind that has weight. Wallace looked at Cole. He looked at Evelyn. He looked at the 60 people who were watching him with the particular attention of a community that was in this moment deciding what it thought of him. He had built his standing in Harding County over decades. He had built it carefully. It was not as unassailable as he believed no one standing is, but it mattered to him. She could see that it mattered. That the public nature of this which he had designed as a weapon had become something that cut in both directions. 3,000, he said. His voice had flattened. "Done," Cole said immediately. Wallace blinked. He had expected negotiation. He had expected the back and forth that gave him room to maneuver. Cole had not given him room. "I'll have the draft at your office Monday morning," Cole said. "You'll sign the note over to me at that time, and I'll expect both notes returned to the Carter family marked settled before the end of the week." He held out the document. "Do we have an agreement?" Wallace took the paper. He held it for a moment. She watched his face go through the specific process of a man accepting a loss while performing acceptance, the slight adjustment of the jaw, the recalibration of the expression towards something that could be presented as dignity. "We have an agreement," he said. He left. His lawyer followed. His foreman followed. The crowd around them did not return immediately, to its ordinary business. 60 people stood in the Whitmore yard in the summer heat and looked at Evelyn Carter and Cole Harrison, and for a moment nobody said anything. Then Silas Whitmore cleared his throat. "Well," he said with the understated satisfaction of a man who has watched something he approved of, "I believe there's pie going to waste at the end table." The yard exhaled. Conversations resumed. The particular social organism of the Whitmore gathering reorganized itself around the fact that the event had concluded, and it was after all still a Sunday afternoon. Evelyn stood in the middle of it and felt the weight of the last 5 minutes settle into her body. The adrenaline of it, the fear she had kept, controlled the relief that was only now beginning to arrive. She turned to Cole. $3,000, she said. "Yes, that's on top of the 4,700. "The math is right," he said. She looked at him. "Cole, Evelyn, that is nearly $8,000. "It is. For a south parcel and 3 cattle worth a fraction of that." He was quiet for a moment. And then he said with the directness that she had come to understand was simply how he was not a performance of plainness, but the actual thing. The land and the cattle were a fair transaction. The rest of it is something different. She felt the pressure in her chest again. The one she still did not have a name for. The one that had been building since the fence line, and the cornbread, and the 20 minutes in the barn, and the kitchen table at 3 in the morning. She felt Clara at her elbow before she heard her. "Evelyn," Clara said. Her voice was doing something it rarely did, coming out without its polish. Raw at the edges. "Is it?" "It's handled," Evelyn said. Clara was quiet for a moment. She was looking at Cole with an expression Evelyn had never seen on her face before in all the years she had known it. Something that was not jealousy, not competition, not the complicated maneuvering of a beautiful woman in a room full of people watching. Something that looked very much like genuine recognition. Like she was finally seeing something clearly that she had been looking at sideways for weeks. "I owe you both an apology," Clara said. She said it looking at Cole, which surprised Evelyn. She had expected the apology to be directed at her. "I made a calculation about my cousin's life based on what I thought she deserved, and I was wrong about that." She looked at Evelyn then. "I was wrong about almost everything." Evelyn looked at her. Clara was 22 and beautiful and frightened, and right now standing in the middle of a Sunday crowd trying to say something true in public, which was perhaps the bravest thing Evelyn had ever seen her do. "I know," Evelyn said. "That's not—" Clara stopped. "That's not enough, is it?" "Not yet," Evelyn said. "But it's real. That matters." Clara pressed her lips together and nodded and moved away back toward the women near the oak trees with the particular careful posture of someone who is holding themselves together by an act of will. Evelyn watched her go. "She meant it," Cole said quietly. "I think she did," Evelyn said. "Clara doesn't say things she doesn't mean. That's one thing about her I've always been able to trust." She paused. "She just doesn't always think clearly about what she means before she acts on it." "That's true of most people," he said. She looked at him. "Not you." He thought about that. "I act slowly," he said. "That's not the same as thinking clearly. Sometimes it just means I take longer to make the same mistakes." She was surprised by that, by the honesty of it, the willingness to not be the composed and certain figure she had been building in her mind. "What mistakes have you made?" she asked. She meant it as a genuine question, not a test. He was quiet for a moment. "I'll tell you sometime," he said. "Not here." Not here. Which meant somewhere else. Which meant there was a somewhere else assumed between them. She felt the shape of that assumption and did not move away from it. "Cole," she said. "You spent $8,000. Close to it. Why?" He looked at her. The full, unhurried look that she had been the subject of since the first Sunday at the lemonade table. The look that she had spent 2 weeks trying to classify and had finally understood was simply the look of a person who was actually seeing her. "Because everyone else saw your size," he said. "And I saw your courage." A pause. "And because it seemed to me that Harding County had been undervaluing you for a considerable amount of time, and that miscalculation had a cost, and I had the means to correct it." Evelyn Carter stood in the Whitmore yard in the summer heat of 1887, surrounded by 60 people who were pretending not to watch her, and she felt something give way inside her chest. Not collapse, but open. The way a door opens when the thing holding it closed finally simply lets go. She did not cry. She was not a woman who cried in public, and she did not intend to start. But she looked at Cole Harrison, and she let him see what was in her face, which was the thing she had been protecting the most carefully. The thing she had kept behind the practical and the composed and the capable, the simple, enormous, terrifying truth that she had wanted this. Had wanted someone to see her. Had been waiting for it so long she had almost stopped believing it was possible. She let him see that. He saw it. "Come on," she said finally. "You promised me there was pie going to waste." The corner of his mouth moved. This time it became the actual smile. "I did not promise that," he said. "Whitmore said that." "You were standing right there." "There," she said. "It's close enough." They walked toward the pie table together, and the yard moved around them, and the summer afternoon continued, and Evelyn Carter held her head the way she always held it, straight, level, unapologetic, and felt for the first time in longer than she could remember, like the space she took up in the world was exactly the right amount. The pie was good. That was the thing Evelyn remembered afterward, in the strange way that small details attach themselves to large moments. The pie was apple slightly oversweet, and she ate 2 slices standing at the end of the Whitmore table, while Cole stood beside her and talked to old Silas about water access on the Miller Creek Road, and the sun was still high, and the yard was still full of people, and for about 20 minutes the world was just that simple. Then Martha Hobbs appeared again. Martha Hobbs was a woman who operated on the understanding that information was power, and that power should be collected continuously and distributed strategically, and she had clearly been recalibrating since Evelyn had corrected the record earlier, and then the scene with Wallace had provided an entirely new set of facts to work with. "Well," she said, arriving at Evelyn's elbow with the inevitability she always carried, "I must say that was quite something. Mr. Wallace leaving like that." She looked between Evelyn and Cole with the bright assessing attention of a woman taking inventory. "I suppose we all had the wrong impression about the situation." "Several wrong impressions," Evelyn said. "Yes." Martha paused. "Though of course now people are wondering." She let that sit, which was a technique Evelyn had watched her use for 15 years. The unfinished sentence that invited you to fill in the space with your own anxiety. Evelyn did not fill the space. Martha tried again. "Mr. Harrison spending that kind of money. For a neighbor." "For a business arrangement," Evelyn said. "And a principal, of course." Martha's eyes moved to Cole. "And you're planning to stay in the county, Mr. Harrison, long term?" "I am," Cole said. He said it without looking at Evelyn, which she appreciated, because if he had looked at her in that moment, she would have had to manage her face, and she was tired of managing her face. "How lovely," Martha said in the tone of a woman who was going to have a great deal to say about this to a great many people before the sun went down. "How absolutely lovely." She drifted away. Cole looked at Evelyn sidelong. "She's going to talk about this for a month." "At least," Evelyn agreed. "But she's going to talk about the version where I handled it, which is the version I wanted." He was quiet for a moment. "Is that enough? Just the version?" She thought about it honestly. "For now," she said. "The version becomes the record. The record becomes what people believe. And what people believe in this county has real weight. You've been here long enough to know that." "I have," he said. "I just wonder sometimes whether you spend too much energy managing what people believe, and not enough." He stopped. "Not enough what?" He looked at her. "Not enough deciding that some of those people's opinions don't have to matter." She held his gaze. "You try living in a body the county has had opinions about since you were 12 years old," she said. "And then tell me whether you can just decide those opinions don't matter." He didn't look away. "You're right," he said. "That was easy to say and harder to mean. I'm sorry." That surprised her. The directness of it, the absence of qualification. "You apologize cleanly," she said. "My mother insisted on it," he said. "She said a half apology was worse than no apology because it used up the goodwill without earning it." She sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was. A pause, and something moved briefly across his face, not grief exactly, but the close relative of it. The expression of someone who has made a kind of peace with a loss, but has not forgotten the weight of it. She would have liked you. Evelyn looked at her empty plate. Don't say things like that, she said. Why? Because they're the kind of things that are very easy to say and very hard to unknow once you've heard them. She set the plate down on the table. And I have enough things I can't unknow already. He was quiet for a moment. Is that bad? He asked. She looked at the yard. At the people moving through it, the children running the old men in their chairs, the women with their careful arrangements of themselves in public. At Clara, who had found a spot near the fence and was standing alone, which was something Evelyn had never seen her do at a gathering. Clara, who was always the center, always the one being orbited, standing alone at the edge of things, with an expression that looked stripped of its usual performance. No, she said finally, it's not bad. George Carter was on the porch when she got home. He had not come to the Whitmore gathering, she had not asked him to, and he had not offered, and the unspoken agreement between them, since the sitting room conversation, was that some things needed to settle before they could be addressed directly. But he was on the porch, which meant he had been waiting, which meant Reuben or someone else had already told him something. She dismounted and tied her horse and came to the porch. He looked at her, the way he had been looking at her for the past several days, with the particular attention of a man who is trying to see something he has been missing for a long time and is not sure yet whether he is capable of it. I heard Wallace came to the gathering, he said. He did. And that Cole Harrison. He did, she said again. She sat down in the chair beside him, the one that had been her mother's, the one she only sat in when she needed to be in a conversation for a long time. Papa, I need to ask you something and I need you to answer me honestly. He folded his hands. The February note, she said. The second one with Harlan Beck. His face confirmed it before he spoke. I knew about it, he said. I knew Wallace had it. I knew he was going to use it. He said it quietly with the flatness of a man saying the thing he has been most dreading. I was going to tell you. After the first note was settled. I told myself I thought it would be easier to tell you when the bigger thing was handled. She sat with that. But that's not why you didn't tell me, she said. He was quiet. Papa. No, he said. That's not why. Then why? He looked at his hands, the hands that were missing 2 fingers on the left. From the accident, no one talked about the hands that had built this ranch and held her mother's and signed documents she should have been told about. Because I thought if you knew the full size of it, he said, you'd give up. The words landed in the space between them. She sat with those 2 for a moment, turned them over, felt the full weight of what they meant that her father, who knew her better than almost anyone who had watched her fix fences and treat animals and manage this land for 4 years, had still at the bottom of it believed she could be broken by the size of a problem. I have never given up on anything in my life, she said. I know that. Then why? Because it's different when it's your own child, he said, and his voice broke on it just slightly, just at the edge, but she heard it. When it's something bearing down on your child, the math you do isn't the same. You don't think I can fix this. You think I need to protect her from knowing how bad it is. Even when she's 25 and running the ranch better than you ever did. He stopped. Even when she doesn't need protecting. Evelyn looked at her father. How was old? She had been watching him get old for 4 years and not allowing herself to name it. He was thinner and smaller in the chair that had once seemed sized for him, and his eyes had the particular tiredness of a man who had been carrying something in silence for too long. She felt the anger. It was still there. It was real. She would not pretend it wasn't. But underneath the anger was something else. Something that had her mother's shape. The grief of loving someone who hurt you while trying to protect you. In the only language they knew. You can't make decisions about my life because you're afraid for me, she said. Even when you love me. Do you understand that? Yes, he said. And you have to tell me things, the real things. Even when they're bad. Especially when they're bad, she paused. Because I am not going to break. I have never broken. and I need you to stop expecting me to." He nodded. His eyes were wet again, as they had been in the sitting room. He did not try to hide it this time. "I'm sorry," he said. "For the note, for Wallace, for all of it, Evelyn. I am deeply sorry." She sat with him on the porch for a while after that, not talking much. The evening was coming in the heat, softening at the edges. The first sound of the night insects starting up somewhere beyond the fence line. She thought about her mother, who had made dresses in the wrong sizes and worried in the wrong directions, and loved her in the only way she knew how. She thought about Clara on the Whitmore fence. She thought about her father's hands. She thought about Cole Harrison, who had spent close to $8,000 and called it a principle. She had things to figure out about that, about what it meant and what she would do about it and what she was willing to let herself want. She was not a woman who rushed those calculations. She was going to do them properly. But sitting on the porch in the evening quiet with her father, she let herself feel something that was close to peace. Not resolution, there was still too much to resolve for that. But something like the beginning of a path forward that she had chosen herself, that she had built herself, that did not require her to be smaller or quieter or less than what she was. "Cole Harrison," her father said finally. She looked at him. "He's a good man," he said. "I know. Your mother would have said something very practical about him." What would she have said? George Carter almost smiled, the first real one she had seen from him in weeks. She would have said a man who spends $8,000 on a principle and doesn't make a speech about it is worth keeping track of. Evelyn looked out at the yard. She wasn't wrong about most things, she said. No, he agreed. She wasn't. Monday came with the particular efficiency of days that have things in them. Cole arrived at Wallace's office at 9 in the morning with the payment draft and 2 witnesses, his foreman and Silas Whitmore, who had agreed when asked and seemed to take a specific satisfaction in the arrangement that he was too dignified to express directly. Wallace signed the notes over without drama. The transaction was done in under 20 minutes. Evelyn was not there. She had decided not to be deliberately, because the Monday transaction was administrative, and her presence would have made it about something personal when she needed it to remain a legal matter of record. Cole brought the documents to her that afternoon. He rode up to the Carter ranch at 3 o'clock, and she was in the yard when he arrived. She always seemed to be in the yard when he arrived, which she had noticed and decided not to analyze, and he handed her an envelope without ceremony. "Both notes," he said. "Marked settled. The originals." She took the envelope. She did not open it immediately. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome." She looked at him. He had dismounted and was standing with his hat in his hand, which was the posture he had when he was not in the middle of something and had not yet decided what came next. It was a different quality than his public stillness, more open, she thought. Like the version of him that existed when no one else was watching. "Come in," she said. "I made coffee this morning and there's some left." He followed her inside. She poured coffee into 2 cups and set them on the kitchen table and sat down, and he sat across from her, and for a moment they just sat, and it was the first time they had been inside a room together that did not have the charge of a crisis behind it. It felt different, more ordinary, more real. She opened the envelope and looked at both documents. Her father's signature, the amounts, the red stamp across each one. She put them back. "I'm going to pay you back," she said. He wrapped his hands around the coffee cup. He had working hands. She had noticed that early, the particular quality of hands that had spent decades doing real labor and bore the marks of it. He was not a man who had simply inherited wealth and managed it from behind a desk. "The south parcel and the cattle covered the first note," he said. "That was a fair transaction. The second—" "I know what the second was," she said. "I know you did it because you felt it was right. I'm not arguing with why you did it. I'm telling you that I'm going to pay it back." He looked at her. "How?" "I have some ideas," she said. "The Ridgeback property needs management on the east side. Reuben mentioned you haven't got someone handling the boundary cattle consistently. I know how to do that work. I can take payment in credit against the debt." I was quiet for a moment. You want to work off my debt to yourself. I want to do work I'm capable of for fair compensation, she said. The fact that the compensation will go toward a debt is a separate matter. That's a very precise distinction. I'm a precise person. He looked at his coffee for a moment. Then, Evelyn, can I ask you something? You can ask. Why is it important to you to pay it back? He looked at her, the full look, the one she had stopped trying to deflect. I'm not asking to argue. I'm genuinely asking. She thought about how to answer that. The honest answer, not the practical one. Because I need to know, she said, that what's between us, whatever it is between us. Not between me and a debt I owe you. I've spent my whole life with people deciding my value based on what I needed from them or what I could give them. I don't want that to be the foundation of... She stopped. He waited. Of anything that matters, she said. The kitchen was quiet for a moment. The east boundary work, he said. 3 mornings a week, standard wage, applied to the debt. She looked at him. That's agreeing to it. That's agreeing to it, he confirmed. You didn't negotiate. There wasn't anything to negotiate, he said. The terms are fair, the arrangement makes sense, and you've already decided, which means arguing would just be wasting both our time. She almost smiled. She felt it at the corner of her mouth and let it stay there. You're learning. I've been paying attention, he said. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. Cole, she said. You told me at the Whitmore gathering that you'd tell me about your mistakes, some other time, not there. He stilled very slightly. I did. Is this some other time? He looked at his hands for a moment. The long look of a man deciding something. I was married, he said. 8 years ago. Her name was Helen. She was from a good family in Montana, well-liked kind. She died of a fever when we'd been married 2 years. He said it plainly, the way he said everything, but she could hear underneath the plainness what it had cost him to put in that register to make it speakable. I spent the 5 years after that building the ranch, working, not much else. The work was... He paused. The work was what I had. I was good at it. I made it enough. But it wasn't, she said. No, he said. It wasn't. He looked at her. The mistake, he said, was deciding that because I had lost something irreplaceable, I no longer had the right to look for something else, or the right to believe it existed. He paused. That was pride, dressed up as grief. I've spent 8 years being very certain that I had made peace with it, and I had not. I had just gotten good at being alone. She sat with that. It was a large thing to say. It was the kind of thing that opened a door, and they both knew it. What changed? She said. He looked at her. She looked back at him. The kitchen was very quiet. I saw a woman carrying a wounded horse in the burning heat, he said. Alone, not looking for anyone to notice, just doing the thing that needed doing because she was the person who would do it. She felt the pressure in her chest again, the one she had finally started to name quietly in the dark of her room at night. The name for it was not complicated. It was just something she had not let herself say out loud. Cole, she said. Yes. I need more time. He nodded. I know. Not because I don't... She stopped. Tried again. Not because the answer is no, but because I've been managing everything for a long time, and I need to be sure that when I step toward something I'm doing it because I want to, not because someone solved a problem for me, and I feel obligated, he said. Yes. I don't want that either, he said. For what it's worth, that's not how this feels to me, but I understand why you need to be sure. She looked at him for a long moment. How does it feel to you? She asked. He was quiet for a moment, just honest. Like I found something I wasn't looking for, he said. And I'm trying not to be stupid about it, she breathed. Finish your coffee, she said, and then I'll show you what the east boundary situation actually looks like, so you know what you're agreeing to when we start work next week. He looked at her, and this time the not-quite smile became the actual one, full, unhurried real. Yes, ma'am, he said. Chate. The weeks that followed were different in quality from anything that had come before. Not easier. Exactly, the ranch work did not become easier. The county did not stop talking, and the debt did not pretend it had not happened. But different. Steadier. She worked the Ridgeback East boundary 3 mornings a week as agreed. Cole was there sometimes, and not there other times, and she understood that he was being careful about that, giving her the independence of the work, without the weight of his constant presence, showing up enough to be consistent, and stepping back enough not to crowd her. She appreciated that more than she could say. More she thought than he probably knew. The county adjusted its story. It did that with everything. Eventually the facts became worn smooth by repetition until the sharp edges were gone, and what remained was a shape people could live with. The shape that remained by the middle of August was approximately this. Evelyn Carter had handled a difficult situation with unusual capability. Cole Harrison had supported her in doing so, and whatever was between them was their business, and appeared to be serious. That last part made Martha Hobbs deeply satisfied, which was the most Evelyn could have hoped for. Clara was different too, not transformed. Evelyn did not believe in transformations, the sudden radical revision of who a person was, because she had seen enough of life to know that people were who they were, and changed slowly if at all, and pretending otherwise was the setup for a disappointment. But Clara was different. She had stopped positioning. She had started asking real questions instead of performing interest. She had come to Evelyn 3 weeks after the Whitmore gathering and asked without any of her usual management whether she could help with the harvest planning because she had been watching Evelyn do it alone for years and she thought she could learn. Evelyn had said yes. That had been harder than it sounded. She was sitting at the kitchen table with the harvest ledger on a Thursday evening in late August when she heard someone ride up to the house. The familiar sound, the particular horse, the particular unhurried pace. She did not look up from the ledger. Cole knocked. "Come in," she said. He came in. He did not sit immediately. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen for a moment, which was unusual. He was not a man who stood in doorways. He was either in a room or outside it. She looked up. His expression was doing something she hadn't seen before. Not troubled, not quite. More like a man who has decided to say something and has passed the point of deciding and is now just doing it. "What happened?" she said. "Nothing happened," he said. "I need to tell you something." She set down her pen. He sat. Not across from her, which was where he usually sat, but in the chair to her left closer. Not reaching for her hand or anything like that. Just closer. "I've been offered a contract," he said. "For the Ridgeback cattle. A buyer from Colorado, large operation. It's a good contract. It would require me to expand, probably double the herd over 18 months, take on more land, more hands." She watched him. "That sounds like good news," she said carefully. "It is," he said. "The parcel I'd need to expand onto is the Carter South boundary." She stilled. "The 40 acres I sold you," she said. "Yes. And another 20 beyond it, if your father would consider selling." He looked at her directly. "I'm not asking you to agree to anything right now. I'm telling you because it affects your land and your family, and I won't make a move on it without telling you first, and I won't make a move on it without your agreement." She sat with that for a moment. The 40 acres she had sold him to solve the debt. The land that had started all of this. Now he needed it as the cornerstone of an expansion that would make the Ridgeback one of the significant operations in Harding County. "Why are you telling me before you've talked to my father?" she said. "Because it's your family's land and you manage it," he said. "And because if you have a reason to say no, I want to know that before anyone else is involved." She looked at him. "What would we get?" she said. "If we agreed." "Fair market value for the additional 20, he said. "And a percentage of the cattle contract revenue for 2 years in exchange for boundary access and cooperation on the water rights." "How much percentage?" "Whatever you think is fair," he said. "I mean that. You know this land and these numbers better than I do." She did not say anything for a moment. She was doing the math, and it was good math. She could see that immediately the numbers arranged themselves into a picture that was unambiguously in the Carter family's favor. A percentage of a Colorado cattle contract at that scale would do more for the Carter Ranch in 2 years than 5 good seasons. She knew that, and he knew she would know it. You structured this on purpose, she said. He looked at her. I structured it so it was fair to everyone. You structured it so it was especially good for us. Maybe, he said. Is that a problem? She looked at him for a long moment. Cole, she said. Yes. Is this? She stopped. She was not usually a woman who ran out of words. She found words reliable. She had always found them reliable. Are you doing this because of the business, or because you're trying to do something for me? The honest pause, the kind she had come to recognize. Both, he said. Probably. Is that wrong? She looked at her ledger, at the numbers that had been her life for 4 years, the hard math of a ranch that was always almost enough, always almost secure, always one bad season from difficulty. She looked at what the numbers would become with the arrangement he was describing. Then she looked at him. I need to talk to my father, she said. I know. And I need to think. I know that too. And Cole? She stopped. She was going to say something careful, something practical, something that managed the distance between what she was feeling and what she was ready to say out loud. She did not say the careful thing. The time I asked for, she said. I think I've had it. He went very still. Not the stillness of discomfort, the stillness of a man who is paying very close attention. Yes, he said. I'm sure, she said, that I'm not saying this because I feel obligated. I've checked that. I've checked it a lot of times. She met his eyes. I'm saying it because I want to. Because you are the most honest person I have encountered in a long time. And because you see me when you look at me. And because I have been alone in the work of my life for 4 years. And I would like to not be alone in it anymore. He looked at her for a moment. I'd like that too, he said. His voice was quiet, not performing quietness. Just quiet the way things are that are real. Good, she said. Now help me with this harvest ledger. Your east boundary cattle have been using more of my water access than we accounted for, and I need to show you the numbers. He blinked. She pushed the ledger across the table toward him. Evelyn, he said. Yes, I was going to. He stopped. The not-quite smile was doing its thing. I thought there would be a moment. There was a moment, she said. It was 30 seconds ago. I said what I needed to say, and now we have work to do. The moment is not going anywhere. She tapped the ledger. Water rights Cole. Look at the numbers. He looked at the ledger. Yes, ma'am, he said for the second time since he'd known her. She did not smile. But the corner of her mouth did the thing it did, and she did not try to stop it, and he saw it, and she let him. They worked through the harvest ledger together until the light was gone, and the crickets were loud outside the kitchen window, and when Clara came through and found them there, she stopped in the doorway and read the room with the quick, accurate attention she had always had for the thing underneath the surface. She said nothing, but she smiled a real one, not the performed kind, the one that lived on her face when she wasn't managing anything. She poured herself coffee and sat down at the far end of the table and looked at the ledger and said, What are we working on? Water rights, Evelyn said. Show me, Clara said. Evelyn turned the ledger and showed her. Later after. Cole had ridden home, and Clara had gone to bed, and the kitchen was hers again in the way it was always hers in the last hour of the night. Evelyn sat at the table and felt the shape of what her life was becoming. The debt cleared. The land secured. Her father sleeping more soundly than he had in months. Clara learning to ask instead of maneuver. And Cole Harrison, honest, steady, unhurried Cole Harrison, who looked at her the way things deserve to be looked at when they are genuinely worth seeing. She was not a woman who expected the world to be simple. She had never been that woman and did not intend to start. There would be hard seasons. There would be the county and its opinions and its long institutional memory for who it had decided people were. There would be work always, the work endlessly. The work which she did not resent because the work was also the life, and she loved the life. But she felt sitting in her kitchen in the late summer of 1887, like the life ahead was full in a way the life behind had not been. Like something had been added to it that changed the quality of everything else. She blew out the lamp. She went to bed. She slept. The autumn of 1887 arrived, the way good things often do in a life that has been waiting quietly, without announcement, settling over Harding County like a change in the quality of light, rather than anything you could point to and name. Evelyn noticed it first in the work. The east boundary job at Ridgeback had settled into a rhythm by September, 3 mornings a week, consistent, the kind of labor she could do with the efficient unconsciousness of a person whose body knows what it's doing and lets the mind go somewhere else. She liked that about it. She liked the cattle and the fence line and the particular quality of the Ridgeback land, which was different from the Carter land, in ways she found interesting. Better water distribution, shallower topsoil on the east side, a drainage issue near the creek that she had identified in her second week and proposed a solution to without being asked. Cole had implemented the solution without discussion. She had noticed that about him, the way he received a good idea. Not with the performance of being impressed, not with the slight hesitation of a man whose pride required him to adjust the idea before accepting it. Just recognized it as good, acted on it, moved forward. She had worked around men her entire life who were incapable of that. The absence of it in him was something she was still getting used to. The debt was smaller now. She tracked it the way she tracked all her numbers carefully in the ledger she kept in the kitchen, updated every week. 3 mornings at standard wage, 12 weeks in. The number was moving. Cole did not talk about the debt. He had agreed to the arrangement, and he appeared to consider the subject closed, which meant that the tracking of it was hers to do, and hers alone, which was exactly how she wanted it. They had not talked again about what she had said in the kitchen in August. The thing she had said, and he had received, and neither of them had dressed up in more words than it needed. But the shape of it was present between them in everything. In the way he handed her coffee when she arrived at the Ridgeback. In the way she told him without being asked when she thought he was making a mistake on the cattle rotation. In the way they had started to exist in the same space, with the ease of people who have stopped pretending they need to perform for each other. She had decided that this was enough for now. That this, the work, the coffee, the ease, was itself a kind of answer to the question she had been asking herself since that kitchen table conversation. Whether what was between them was real enough to be worth the risk of it. Whether she was ready. She decided she was ready on a Tuesday in October, standing at the east boundary fence, with her hands in her coat pockets and the early morning cold on her face, watching a hawk move in long, slow circles over the field. She decided it quietly, the way she decided most things. Without drama, without the performance of a moment. She rode to the main house when her morning work was done. Cole was in the yard when she rode up, talking to his foreman, a serious man named Garrett, who had worked for him since Montana, and who gave Evelyn the respectful, slightly wary attention of someone who has recognized that a person is important without yet fully understanding why. Cole looked up when she arrived. She dismounted, and he said something to Garrett, who nodded and left, and then he turned to her with the full attention he always gave her. "You finished early," he said. "I did," she said. "I need to talk to you." He read her face. She had watched him learn to do that over months, not reading it the way people read her, usually looking for cracks in the composure, looking for the vulnerability underneath the practical surface. Reading it the way you read something you are genuinely trying to understand. "Come inside," he said. They sat at his kitchen table, which was larger than hers, and less worn with the particular blankness of furniture that has been in a house without quite belonging to it yet. She thought sometimes that the Ridgeback house was still becoming itself, that Cole had arrived with his history and his work and his careful attention to everything practical, and the human layer of the place was still being built. She poured her own coffee because she knew where it was. She sat. "I've been thinking about what I said in August," she said. He was very still. "All right." I said I was sure. I was." She wrapped her hands around the cup. "I'm still sure. I want you to know that hasn't changed." She looked at him. "But I've also been thinking about what comes next, practically. And I think we need to talk about it like practical people, because that's what we both are, and pretending otherwise would be uncomfortable," he said. "Wrong," she said. "It would be wrong, for both of us." He nodded, listening, fully. "If this goes forward," she said, "I'm not leaving the Carter ranch. My father is there. Clara is there. The land is mine to manage, and I intend to keep managing it. That is not a thing that changes. I wouldn't ask it to, he said. And the Ridgeback and the Carter land need to stay separate operations with separate ledgers. I'm not interested in being absorbed into something. I'm interested in being partnered with someone. Those are different things, he said. Very different. I agree with the distinction completely. He looked at her. Evelyn, when I said I found something I wasn't looking for, I meant you. Not your land. Not a merger of property. You. He paused. I've been in business long enough to know the difference between an acquisition and a partnership. I'm not interested in acquiring anything from you. She looked at him for a long moment. All right, she said. All right. All right, she said again, with the finality she put on things when they were decided. Then I think you should come to the Carter Ranch for supper on Sunday, with my father. And we should all talk about the Colorado contract and what the next year looks like for both properties, and have it be a real conversation between people who are going to be in each other's lives for a long time. He was quiet for a moment. That's your version of a formal declaration, he said. Yes, she said. I'll be there Sunday, he said. Good. She stood up. I have to get back. I told Reuben I'd look at the north pasture drainage this afternoon. He stood up too. Evelyn. She stopped. He came around the table. Not fast, not with any performance. He came around the table, and he stood in front of her close enough that she could see the gray at his temples, and the weather in his face, and the particular steadiness in his eyes that she had been looking at for 4 months and had not gotten used to. He took her hand. Just her hand. Held it the way you hold something you intend to be careful with. She looked down at their hands, and then up at his face, and she let herself feel the full weight of the moment, not managed, not analyzed, not held at arm's length through the glass of practicality. Just felt. I'm glad you came to my fence, he said. She thought of the north boundary line, the heat, the post hole digger. Him on his horse asking whether she always worked where nobody could see her. I'm glad you asked a real question, she said. She did not pull her hand away. He did not let it go. They stood in his kitchen on a Tuesday morning in October, and the ordinary sounds of the ranch moved around them, outside horses, when the distant voices of the hands, and she felt the truth of something she had known for a long time, but had not let herself hold without qualification. She was not too much for this. She was exactly enough. Sunday came. George Carter wore his good jacket, which told her he understood what the occasion was without her having to explain it. He shook Cole's hand at the door with the particular gravity of a man who has something to account for and is trying to account for it through the quality of his welcome. Mr. Harrison, he said. Cole said. Please. Her father nodded. Cole. Clara had made the table look nice better than Evelyn would have, because Clara had always understood the language of spaces in a way Evelyn did not prioritize. Extra candles. The good dishes. Wildflowers in a jar at the center that she had gone out in the cold morning to pick, which Evelyn noticed and did not comment on. They ate. Real food. Evelyn had cooked, which meant it was substantial and good in the straightforward way of a woman who fed people because they needed feeding and not for the performance of it. Cole ate the way he always ate around her, which was with the actual attention of a man who had not forgotten the cornbread conversation at the first Whitmore gathering. The Colorado contract was on the table figuratively through most of the meal. Her father asked the real questions, the financial ones, the timeline, the risk. Cole answered them directly. Evelyn watched her father's face move through the calculations, watched him become more present, more himself than she had seen him in months. The engagement of a man who had spent too long feeling useless and was being given something real to think about. The water rights question on the south boundary, her father said at one point. That's going to need formal documentation. Agreed, Cole said. I'd want Evelyn to review anything before it's filed. Her father looked at her, then at Cole, then back at her with the expression of a man recognizing something he should have understood sooner. Of course, her father said. After supper, he and Cole stayed at the table talking cattle and contracts, and Evelyn and Clara cleared the dishes and stood in the kitchen together in the comfortable silence of two women who have been doing that particular thing together long enough to have a system. "He looked at you 3 times during supper," Clara said. "For no reason, just to look." "I noticed," Evelyn said. "You didn't look back." "I was listening to your father ask the water rights question." "Evelyn." Clara set down the plate she was holding and turned to look at her with the direct attention she had developed over the past weeks, the look that was not managing anything but simply seeing. "Are you happy?" The question landed with the weight of its simplicity. Evelyn stood in her kitchen, the one she had stood in since she was 8 years old, the one where she had worked through 1,000 hard mornings and made 1,000 decisions, and sat at the table alone at 3 in the morning doing the math of her life. She thought about the question. "Yes," she said. The word came out without hesitation, which surprised her slightly. Clara smiled. "The real one." "Good," she said. "It's about time." November arrived with the first real cold, and with it, the thing no one had seen coming. Harlan Beck came to Harding County. She heard about it from Reuben, who heard it from the feed store, who heard it from Beck's own assistant, who had come ahead of him. Harlan Beck, the Millbrook lender, the man who had originally held both Carter notes before selling them to Wallace, was in Harding County on other business, and had asked to speak to Evelyn Carter. She did not know what to make of that. She rode to the county office where Beck was staying on a Wednesday afternoon. Cole offered to come. She told him no, not because she didn't want him there, but because she needed to know first what this was, and she needed to know it with only herself in the room. Harlan Beck was a small man, older with the careful movements of someone who had spent a long time in the business of money and had developed a particular awareness of how quickly situations could shift. He looked at her when she walked in with the assessing attention of a man who had formed an impression from description and was adjusting it against reality. "Miss Carter," he said, "thank you for coming." "Mr. Beck," she said, "what is this about?" He sat. She sat. He folded his hands on the desk between them with the deliberateness of a man preparing to say something he has organized. "Richard Wallace," he said. She kept her face neutral. "What about him?" "He came to me in January," Beck said, "when he purchased the second note from me, the February equipment loan." He paused. "He was aware of the first note before he came to me. He told me he had already acquired it from the county bank. He asked me specifically whether your father had any other outstanding debt, and when I told him about the equipment note, he purchased it immediately." She was very still. "He came to you first," she said. "He already had the first note, and he went looking for additional debt." "Yes," Beck said. "And I want you to know I should have asked more questions at the time. I was aware of what he was doing, and I told myself it was legitimate commerce, and I did not. I did not look carefully at what it meant for your family." He met her eyes. "I'm here because I believe you should have the full picture." Wallace structured the entire arrangement from the beginning. He went looking for Carter debt specifically. This was not opportunity, it was a campaign. Evelyn sat with that for a long moment, the shape of it. The full shape settled into her understanding, like something that had been almost visible for months and had now come entirely into focus. Wallace had not come across the Carter debt by chance. He had gone looking. He had found one note and then gone hunting for another one, and he had purchased them both before approaching her father, and he had disclosed only one because revealing one gave the family just enough hope to make the trap feel like an offer. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "Because I've been thinking about it since the Whitmore gathering," Beck said. "Since I heard what happened. And I believe you deserve to know the truth of what was done to your family." She looked at him. "Is there anything actionable?" she said. "Legally." Beck was quiet for a moment. "Possibly. The non-disclosure of the second note in the context of an arrangement that was contingent on settlement of what he presented as the full debt. There are lawyers who would look at that with interest." She thought about it. Thought about what pursuing it would cost: time, energy, the reopening of something she had been slowly closing. Thought about Wallace and what he deserved and what she actually wanted. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's all I can ask," Beck said. He stood. "Miss Carter, I've heard a great deal about you these past months, from several directions. A pause. The picture that has assembled itself is of a woman who handles things with considerable capability and very little noise. I want you to know that I respect that, and that I regret my part in putting those things in front of you to handle. She looked at him. Your part was smaller than Wallace's, she said. But it was there. Yes, he said. It was. She rode home with the wind coming in from the north and the cold moving through her coat in a way that would have been miserable in a different state of mind, and was merely sharp in this one. She thought about Wallace. She thought about the campaign he had run, the deliberateness of it, the patience of it, the way he had assembled the pieces before her family had known there was a game being played. She thought about what Harlan Beck had said, possibly actionable. She thought about what she wanted. By the time she reached the Carter ranch, she had made a decision. She rode to the Ridgeback instead of going home. Cole listened to the whole thing without interrupting. She told it the way Beck had told her, sequentially clearly, with all the significant details in their proper places. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, in the way she had come to understand meant he was thinking, not withdrawing. He went looking for the debt, Cole said. Before he approached my father, yes. That changes the legal character of what he did. Beck thinks so. Cole was quiet again. Then, what do you want to do? She looked at him. The question she had come here for, not for him to tell her what to do, but for someone to ask her what she wanted and wait for the actual answer. I want it on record, she said. I don't want to spend a year in court. But I want there to be a record in the county office in whatever form is available that says what he did was not a standard business arrangement, that he went looking for our debt and concealed the scope of it. She paused. I want that for my father, so that he stops believing he made a mistake that an honest man couldn't have anticipated. Cole nodded slowly. A formal complaint with the county recorder, not a lawsuit, but documented. Yes. I know a lawyer in Millbrook who handles these matters. I can send word tomorrow. I'll pay the legal cost, she said immediately. Evelyn. Cole. She looked at him. I will pay it. He recognized the look. He did not argue. I'll send word tomorrow, he said. And we'll go to Millbrook together when he's ready to meet. Together, she said. Together, he confirmed. She stood up to go. Wait, he said. She stopped. He came around the table the same way he had in October, unhurried with the quality of intention, and he stood in front of her, and this time he did not just take her hand. He put his hand on her face. Very gently. The way you touch something you are grateful to be allowed to touch. She let him. You are, he said quietly, the most extraordinary person I have ever known in my life, and I need you to know that I know that. Not because you solved a problem, or because you managed something difficult, or because you handled today the way you handled it, but because of who you are underneath all of it. The person who gets up before dawn and feeds the horses and fixes the fences and still has enough left over to be kind. She felt her throat tighten. She was not a woman who cried. She had established that fact about herself early and maintained it consistently. She did not cry. But she let herself feel the full weight of what he had said without moving away from it. Let it land. Let it be true. Cole, she said. Yes. You should ask my father. He looked at her. Ask him, she said. He'll say yes, but ask him. The actual smile. Full and unhurried and real. Saturday, he said. Saturday, she agreed. Her father said yes. He said it with the particular directness of a man who had been waiting to be asked and had prepared himself, which meant he had been thinking about it longer than she had expected, which meant he had seen it coming before she had said a word. I was wondering when you'd get to it. George Carter said to Cole, with something in his face that was almost the man he had been before the debt and the hard years younger more himself. I'd given you until Christmas. I nearly waited that long, Cole said honestly. You didn't, though. No, Cole said. I didn't. Her father looked at her across the room where she was standing by the kitchen doorway, because she had not been able to make herself not be present for this conversation with the eyes of a man who was seeing his daughter clearly, possibly for the first time in a long time. "She's not easy," he said to Cole, not as a warning, as a fact offered with something close to pride. "I know that," Cole said. "She'll tell you when you're wrong. She already does. And she's usually right." "She's right more than she's wrong," Cole said. "Considerably more." Her father nodded slowly, the nod of a man completing a calculation. "Take care of her," he said. "She takes care of herself," Cole said. "I intend to stand beside her while she does it." The room was very quiet. George Carter looked at the man standing in his sitting room, and then at the daughter standing in his doorway, and whatever he saw in the space between them seemed to satisfy something he had been carrying. "That'll do," he said. The formal complaint was filed in Millbrook in December, on a cold day when the first real snow of winter had started to come down, and the county recorder, a woman named Mrs. Abigail Torres, who had been doing the job for 22 years, and who looked at the document Evelyn and Cole's lawyer presented with the careful attention of someone who understood its significance, signed it into the record without comment, but with a small nod that said everything. Richard Wallace was informed by letter. He did not respond publicly. He sold 2 properties in Harding County in the spring. He was by the following autumn no longer a significant presence in the county in any of the ways he had been, which was not a victory. Evelyn celebrated because she was not a woman who celebrated the removal of problems. She was a woman who moved forward once they were gone. She moved forward. The Colorado contract was signed in January. The expansion of the Ridgeback began in February. The Carter land's south boundary became the cornerstone of a cattle operation that by the following summer was drawing interest from buyers in 3 states and had given the Carter Ranch 2 of the most financially stable quarters it had seen in a decade. The wedding was small. She had wanted that, had said so plainly and early before anyone could suggest otherwise. The church in Harding on a Saturday in March, when the first green was starting to show on the ridge, with her father and Clara and Reuben and Garrett and Silas Whitmore, and a handful of people who had been real in her life, not the full county performing their approval. She wore a dress she had made herself. It was not small. It was not constructed to make her look smaller or less or different from what she was. It was blue wool well made, and it fit her body the way good clothes should fit, honoring the body they were put on, not apologizing for it. Clara had helped with the hem. That had been an hour of the 2 of them in the kitchen with pins and thread, and the low-voiced conversation of women who have come a long way from where they started. And it had been? Evelyn thought one of the truest hours she and Clara had shared in all their years together. "You look like yourself," Clara said when it was done. She stood back and looked at Evelyn with the clear eyes she had been growing into over months. "That's better than beautiful." "It's not instead of beautiful," Evelyn said. Clara looked at her. "No," she said. "It's not." The years settled. Not easily. Nothing in a life well lived is easy, and Evelyn had never wanted easy. She had wanted real. She had wanted hers. She got both. The Carter-Harrison operation, which was what the county came to call it, because the 2 ranches were independent and always would be. But the work that moved between them had a particular character that required its own name, became known across Harding County and beyond for a specific quality. Fair wages. Good land management. The kind of operation where the hands stayed for years because they were treated like people who mattered. Where injured animals were not discarded but treated. Where the water access was managed with the long view rather than the immediate profit. That quality had a source. Everyone who worked there knew it. Evelyn Carter Harrison ran the combined operations land management with the same precision and care she had brought to the Carter Ranch since she was 21, plus 4 more years of experience and the resources to implement things she had known needed doing and never had the means to do. She was, by the time she was 30, the most knowledgeable land manager in Harding County. By the time she was 35, people came from other counties to ask her questions. She answered them, clearly and without diminishment. Clara found her own way, which took longer and was harder and was hers to find. She worked for 2 years as a bookkeeper in town. and then, at 27, married a quiet schoolteacher named David, who looked at her with the specific expression of a man who was interested in the person behind the performance, and Clara, who had been waiting for someone to look past the surface, without knowing she was waiting, recognized it when she saw it, and chose it deliberately for the first time in her life. She came to Evelyn afterward and said, "I think I understand now what you meant." "About choosing," Evelyn said. "About choosing," Clara said. "It's terrifying." "Yes," Evelyn said. "It is. And worth it." Evelyn looked at her. "Yes," she said. "Completely." George Carter lived to see his granddaughter born. He held her in the chair by the window, the one that had been his father's before him, and looked at her with the eyes of a man who has been given more than he expected and knows it. He said very little because the moment did not require words, and he had finally in the last years of his life learned the difference. He died the following spring quietly in that same chair on an afternoon when the light was coming through the window, the way it did in that season, long and golden and particular to that place, and no other. Evelyn was with him. She held his hand at the end the way he had held hers when she was small. She grieved him. Fully, without managing it in the way she had learned, was the only honest way to grieve. She missed him for years. She missed him forever in the quiet, persistent way that loss becomes part of the structure of a life, rather than the wound it was at the beginning. Cole was there for all of it. He did not try to fix her grief. He stood beside her through it, the way he had stood beside her through everything else present, unhurried, real. She knew by then what a gift that was. She had known for a long time. The granddaughter grew. Her name was Ruth, for Evelyn's mother, because Evelyn had decided that the complicated love of a woman who hurt you while trying to protect you was still love and deserved a name kept. Ruth was 8 years old when she came to Evelyn in the yard of the Carter Ranch, which was Ruth's ranch now too, in the way that places become yours when you are raised in them, with the serious, focused expression of a child who has a real question. She was a solid child. Strong in the way Evelyn recognized the kind of strength that the world sometimes looked at sideways and would eventually learn to respect. "Grandma Evelyn," Ruth said, "people at school say I'm too big." Evelyn stopped what she was doing. She looked at Ruth, at this girl with her dark eyes and her serious face and her strong hands that were already learning to be useful, and she felt the full weight of the moment. She crouched down to Ruth's level. "Come here," she said. Ruth came. Evelyn put her hands on her granddaughter's face gently, the way Cole had held hers on an October morning a long time ago. "Listen to me," she said. "Are you listening?" "Yes." "You are not too big," Evelyn said. "You are exactly the size of who you are. And who you are is someone with strong hands and a clear mind and a good heart, and there is no version of any of those things that is too much." She looked at Ruth steadily. "Do you understand me?" Ruth thought about it with the seriousness she brought to things. "What do I say to them?" she said. "The people at school." Evelyn thought about her own 12-year-old self. The whispers at the Whitmore gatherings. The dresses that never quite fit the shape the world wanted her to be. The decades of learning to hold her head the way she held it, straight, level, unapologetic. "Nothing," she said. "You don't owe them an answer. You owe yourself a life." She took Ruth's hands in hers. "And then you build it. You build it with your own hands exactly as you are, and you don't wait for the world to tell you it's allowed." She paused. "The world will catch up. It always does when you stop waiting for it." Ruth looked at her. "Is that what you did?" she said. Evelyn thought of the north fence, the post hole digger, the heat. The kitchen table at 3 in the morning. The Whitmore yard, and the piece of paper, and a man who stood one step back and to her left and called it a condition. She thought of everything she had built and lost and fought for, and chosen here on this land, in this life, which was hers, completely, irreversibly, on her own terms, hers. "Yes," she said. "That is exactly what I did." Ruth nodded. The nod of a child filing away something important. She went back to what she had been doing. Helping Reuben's replacement, a young man named Thomas, who was learning fast with the afternoon feeding, with the unself-conscious directness of a child who has been given a real answer and accepted it. Evelyn watched her go. Cole came up beside her from the direction of the barn, the way he had been coming from the direction of things for 18 years now, steady and unhurried, and always present. "What was that about?" he said. "Someone told her she was too big," Evelyn said. He was quiet. "What did you tell her?" Evelyn watched Ruth across the yard, her granddaughter solid and capable, and moving through the world with the unself-conscious ease of someone who has not yet been fully taught to doubt herself. She intended to keep it that way. "I told her the truth," Evelyn said. Cole stood beside her. His hand found hers the way it had found it on a Tuesday morning in October, a long time ago, in a kitchen that was beginning to become a home. She held on. The afternoon moved around them, warm and ordinary and full. The animals and the land and the sound of Ruth's voice asking Thomas a question about the feed schedule. The kind of practical question that had a practical answer. And Evelyn Carter Harrison stood in the yard of the ranch she had built and the life she had chosen, and felt the particular quiet satisfaction of a woman who had stopped waiting for the world to tell her she was worthy. She had built a life that proved it. And it was more than enough. It was everything.